Chapter 1148. PS May 1st Update. Don't rush off to play, remember to cast a monthly vote first. Double the monthly vote for Fan Festival at Chidian 55 now, and red packets for other events can also be given. Why should I explain to you? Empress Luan Xing said arrogantly. Pa! A crisp sound. Ling Han raised his hand and said, You don't seem to understand your own situation. This smack made her feel hot, and strange emotions surged in her body, making her feel like she was about to explode. She didn't dare to play anymore. If she got angry, then wouldn't she always be haunted by this kind of scene in the future? When this body's cultivation reaches the heavenly body tier, my will slowly awaken and merge with her, the Empress said. The 9 snake secret technique is like this. If I am in the mountain river tier, then the 9 bodies will awaken in the mountain river tier, and if I am in the eternal river tier, then it will only awaken in the eternal river tier. Ling Han was startled and then said, Then she probably doesn't know of your existence? No. Empress Luan Xing shook her head. Ling Han's expression was a little awkward, and he said, Then when your will awakens, will she completely disappear? Empress Luan Xing consoled and said, The personalities of these 9 bodies were split from my body in the first place. Strictly speaking, these are all sides of me. Moreover, when I cultivate to the eternal river tier in the future, I can still split my 9 bodies again. Only then did Ling Han feel a little better. He still had a good impression of the naive and muddle-headed 9th king. However, when he thought again, his expression couldn't help but become strange. What's wrong? Empress Luan Xing asked. Ling Han hesitated and said, Then if I marry you, wouldn't I have to give away 9? Darling, how can I deal with all 10 of you at once? Pervert. Empress Luan Xing was furious and slapped Ling Han away. Ling Han was of course deliberately sent flying by the Empress. In the Black Tower, Empress Luan Xing was really no match for him, but he had taken advantage of her for so long, so he should return some. Otherwise, after leaving the Black Tower, he would definitely be tortured by Empress Luan Xing. Thus, he let her hit him a few times to appease her anger. He ran back and said, Wife? Who's your wife? Empress Luan Xing asked in annoyance. She had only given Ling Han a chance. However, if she really wanted her to nod her head willingly, the current Ling Han still didn't have the right to do so. Ling Han snickered and said, Then what should I call you, little darling? Empress Luan Xing was dumbfounded. She had initially thought that Ling Han was a serious person, but who would have thought that he was actually so frivolous? She shook her head, feeling that she might have made a wrong decision, but she didn't want to correct it. Call me Your Majesty, she emphasized. All right. Ling Han nodded. He thought to himself, I'll call you Empress now, but I'll let you call me Lord Husband in the future. That, Your Majesty. There are only 2 of us now. Do you need to call my name? You're not cute at all. Ling Han sighed. Then his expression became serious, and he said, What the hell is an ancient divine tribe? They seem to be very powerful. I know that. The notionless saint started to make his presence known again. He was a mighty saint, yet he was being ignored. These 2 people were really... Didn't they know that a saint's time was incredibly precious? It was rare that a saint like him was willing to give them some guidance, yet they actually didn't care at all. Empress Luan Xing glanced at the orb of light before looking away. With this seemingly omniscient saint around, there were some things that couldn't be hidden. Thus, she might as well take the initiative and say, The ancient divine tribe is a powerful yet rare tribe. They appeared in ancient times, and each individual member of them possesses powerful abilities. Brat, you might also be from the ancient divine tribe. The notionless saint interjected. He felt that Ling Han's physique was unbelievably powerful. There was no other possibility that he was from the ancient divine tribe. Empress Luan Xing nodded. She agreed with this point. However, Ling Han shook his head. He had a clean background, so how could he be from the ancient divine tribe? He merely cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and that was why his physique and divine sense were so powerful that they surpassed their cultivation level. However, although Ling Han hadn't seen the other ancient divine tribes, he only needed to see Empress Luan Xing to know. The 9 snake tribe could have 9 doppelgangers, which was equivalent to having 9 extra lives. This was extremely astonishing, and almost unimaginable. It's about time, Empress Luanxing suddenly said. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, I'll see you out. Empress Luanxing knew about Hu Feiyun's matters, but this was one-sided. When Empress Luanxing entered, Hu Feiyun didn't know what had happened at all. For example, in the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, it was clearly Empress Luanxing who had killed that great beast, yet Hu Feiyun thought that it was Ling Han who had done it. Empress Luanxing nodded, and the two of them exited the Black Tower. Am I just air? Notionless Saint murmured in confusion. Why were they all ignoring him? Senior, I have a question. Me too. Ken Yi and the others surrounded him, instantly restoring Notionless Saint's confidence. He went to instruct them in high spirits. Everyone needed to prove their existence and be needed. This saint had died too long ago, so his mental state was naturally not the same as it had been in the past. He was only flattered by a few shattering void-tier cultivators, and he was already very happy. After exiting the Black Tower, Empress Luanxing's slender body trembled, and her eyes closed. However, she immediately opened them again, and her entire aura changed drastically in an instant. Her high and mighty aura disappeared, and she became a confused little girl. Huh, why am I here? Hu Feiyun asked in confusion. She bit her finger and tilted her head, appearing very strange. Wait here, Ling Han said. When Hu Feiyun nodded, he went to find Shui Yinyu and bring her back. When Shui Yinyu saw Hu Feiyun, she couldn't hide her awe. She whispered to Ling Han, why is the aura she exudes so terrifying? We'll talk about that later. Ling Han shook his head, then smiled at Hu Feiyun and said, Ninth King, I'll take you to a fun place. Okay. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands. With her confused personality, she was really being sold. Ling Han wrapped his divine sense around the two women, and they entered the Black Tower together to the reincarnation tree. This is the reincarnation tree. Ling Han introduced it to Hu Feiyun. In the future, come here to cultivate every night. That way, your cultivation level will increase very quickly. I have to cultivate again? Hu Feiyun said with a bitter expression. I hate cultivation. It's so tiring and boring. Ling Han thought that the 9 kings were all parts of Empress Luanxing's personality. This girl's confusion just happened to be something that Empress Luanxing didn't have, because she had been separated. This was quite interesting. When the 9 doppelgangers returned to the main body, how would Empress Luanxing's personality change? Be a good girl and cultivate well. Ling Han rubbed Hu Feiyun's head. Hu Feiyun pouted. She didn't think there was anything wrong with Ling Han's actions, but Shui Yinyu's eyes almost popped out. That was the 9th king. The Empress had said that seeing the 9 kings was like seeing the Empress. You're really too daring. She didn't know that Ling Han had even smacked Empress Luanxing's behind just now. Thank you for your support all this time. I hope you can all support the Honor Hall of the Qidian 55th Fan Festival and the general election of works. Additionally, there were some red packets and gifts on the fan festival. Take one and continue to subscribe. Reading on your phone is more refreshing. Chapter 1149. PS May 1st Update. Don't go play after it's over. Remember to cast a monthly vote first. Double the monthly vote for Fan Festival on Qidian 55 now. And you can also send red packets for other activities. After comforting Hu Feiyun and telling her to cultivate obediently, Ling Han took Shui Yinyu to the side. He gave Shui Yinyu a passionate kiss first. They hadn't seen each other for more than 2 years, and he really missed this beautiful great vixen. Shui Yinyu struggled at first, but soon melted, and collapsed into Ling Han's arms. Her pretty face became bright red, and her eyes were so charming that it was as if water could drip out of them. No! She wanted to resist, but she also wanted to. Wife, you've been poisoned, and I can only cure it if I give myself to you. Ling Han said seriously. This is the poison of love, the most poisonous thing in the world. However, if I don't go to hell, who will? Shui Yinyu instantly wanted to roll her eyes. This guy was obviously lusting after her, but he still made it sound so dignified. He was really too shameless. But Ling Han kissed her so hard that her mind was a little muddled. She nodded in a daze, and only realized that it was inappropriate after a long while. But after a few more passionate kisses from Ling Han, she became dazed again, and only wanted to be fiercely possessed by this man. I love you, she murmured. I love you too. Ling Han's fingers moved nimbly and very soon, her enchanting body completely appeared in front of him. He used his fingers to trace her delicate body and completely ignited her passion. Love me. Shui Yinyu stretched out her arms and wrapped them around Ling Han's neck like a snake. She hadn't seen her sweetheart for more than 2 years. Although she knew that he must be fine, it was inevitable that she was worried. After meeting Ling Han again, this worry turned into a strong fire of passion, as if it could burn Ling Han. Baby! Ling Han kissed this great vixen. This time he didn't stop at a superficial kiss, and wanted to truly make her his woman. Han, be more gentle, she said in a voice that was almost inaudible. I will. The spring breeze passes through the jade gate, and today it opens for you. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu lay among the flowers. Shui Yinyu curled up in Ling Han's arms, her beautiful face filled with satisfaction. You're a bad person. So you wanted to marry Her Majesty, and that's why you were in such a hurry to kill me. Shui Yinyu couldn't help but pinch Ling Han when she heard him talk about Empress Luanxing. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head and said, This is between me and you. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Wife, you're so beautiful and charming. I've endured for so long. Aren't you afraid that I'll suffocate to death? Be stinky pervert. Even though she had already consummated her marriage with Ling Han, Shui Yinyu was still unable to withstand Ling Han's teasing. Her face would turn red the moment she mentioned it, and she was extremely enchanting. Looking at her charming appearance, Ling Han couldn't help but be excited again. Oh! Shui Yinyu was right next to him, so how could she not have sensed it? Her almond-shaped eyes instantly widened. Wife, let's start the second round now. Ling Han laughed loudly. He flipped over and pressed Shui Yinyu under his body, and began his assault. Again and again. Shui Yinyu had just had a taste, so she was naturally a little greedy. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also intoxicated by this bewitching woman, and it was as if he was the ruler of the country. Only after 3 days did the two of them end this entanglement, and finally exited the Black Tower. Hu Feiyun was already complaining. Cultivating under the reincarnation tree for a day was equivalent to cultivating for a year. She had cultivated for 5 consecutive days, and this was really suffocating for her. She complained that she wanted to go out and get some fresh air. Ling Han shook his head. He hadn't thought that Empress Luanxing would also have such a childish and muddle-headed side. If this side was displayed by that empress, how beautiful would it be? He was slightly expectant. After exiting the Black Tower, Shui Yinyu began to move. She naturally had to live with Ling Han. During the day she would cultivate with the spiritual qi here, and increase her origin power. At night, she would enter the Black Tower to cultivate under the reincarnation tree, and comprehend Great Tao, maximizing the speed of her advancement. Ling Han had 3 quotas for followers and now he had only used 1. Thus, he could completely allow Shui Yinyu to enter his palace to cultivate. As long as no one reported her, Shui Yinyu didn't need to give up her status as an ordinary disciple. Shui Yinyu's focus was on cultivation, while Ling Han's focus was on alchemy. He needed money. The Divine Demon Sword was only a level 3 god tool, and he had to upgrade it to level 4 or level 5. However, that would require countless pieces of level 3 and level 4 godly metal, which would be an astronomical sum. Ling Han indeed had a lot of true origin stones, but it was far from enough. The highest level alchemical pill that he could concoct now was the mysterious azure pill. A single pill could be sold for several thousand true origin stones, and as for the ingredients, he had already planted them in the Black Tower. It wasn't far from the time he could harvest them, so he could save a great deal of money. However, Ling Han still wanted to concoct a higher level alchemical pill. That was because refining a cauldron of pills would take about the same amount of time, but the difference in profits was too great. He definitely had to leave enough time for cultivation. Thus, the alchemical pill he concocted became very important. Of course, he hadn't obtained a higher level pill recipe yet, so he naturally focused on concocting the mysterious azure pill. This made him feel slightly regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have asked Empress Luanxing to make a copy of all the pill recipes that the Alchemy Institution had collected for him. That way he could slowly study them here. Unfortunately, he and Empress Luanxing hadn't brought up this matter at that time. It didn't matter. In any case, it wasn't like he wasn't returning to the joint peace planet. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Fanru hurriedly went to open the door. After a while he returned, handing over an invitation and said, "Young Master Han, this is your invitation." Ling Han took it. As it turned out, this was a gathering jointly organized by a few seed-level geniuses. They would taste tea and discuss Tao. The time was tomorrow at noon, and all the seed-level geniuses of the Mountain River tier were invited. After all, they had entered the sect for a long time, and they hadn't had a proper gathering together. The timing is so coincidental. It can't be targeted at me, right? Ling Han asked with a smile. He had destroyed Gan Shiyun's god tool, and had even taken away her damaged body. This woman definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. I was just thinking there are still 6 people here who have formed the 5th mountain river. Just how strong are they now? The next day, Ling Han strolled towards the summit of the mountain by himself. This time the tea tasting and discussion of Tao would be held at the summit of the White Frost Peak. Because this peak was exclusive to the seed-level geniuses, it was impossible for key disciples and ordinary disciples to spectate even if they wanted to. They couldn't come at all. The peak was very tall, but for mountain river tier cultivators, this bit of height naturally wasn't much. After only an hour, even with Ling Han's strolling speed, he had also arrived at the summit. "Please show me your invitation." This was a very wide platform, and there were 2 young men standing at the entrance. Their bearing was quite extraordinary, and they were acting as guards. They should be someone's follower, right? However, even a follower was so extraordinary, so the personal strength of this seed could be imagined. Ling Han handed over his invitation. A young man accepted it, and a sliver of seriousness appeared on his face as he said, "So it's young Master Han, please." There were multiple rocks placed on the platform of different sizes. Presumably, they were used as seats. At this moment, most of the rocks were already seated. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he saw a few familiar faces. Xiao Sisi Su Jing Duan Quan Lishuan as well as the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping. These 2 obviously didn't recognize Ling Han, because they hadn't heard of Ling Han's name, so they naturally wouldn't connect it to Ling Han. They merely swept a glance over him and then looked away. Then a few more people came over. For example, Xiao Wuk, the muddle-headed Hu Feiyun and Gan Shiyun. The moment this woman appeared, her eyes were fixed on Ling Han, exuding a baleful coldness. "Thank you everyone for your support all this while. This time, I hope that everyone can support the Qidian 55th Fan Festival's Hall of Glory and the general selection of works. Additionally, there were also some red packets and gift bags for the fan festival. Collect them, and continue to subscribe." Chapter 1150. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. In fact, he couldn't even be bothered with her. He took out a divine fruit and started munching on it. This was only a level 2 divine fruit, so it wasn't very valuable. However, Ling Han was eating it like it was a fruit. This caused many people to exclaim in shock. Gan Shiyun almost exploded in anger. This guy was actually eating the fruit as if nothing had happened. He didn't take her threatening gaze seriously at all. Damn it! More and more people arrived. When the sun reached its zenith, no one else arrived. All the stones were occupied, but there were also some people standing. They were all followers and they stood around the platform. They didn't have the right to walk to the front. The number of stones definitely corresponded to the number of seeds. There were no empty seats here, so it was clear that everyone had come to this tea tasting and Tao discussion today. This was the first gathering of seeds, so everyone was very interested in each other. Moreover, every seed was brimming with confidence. They believed that they were invincible, so they naturally wanted to use this opportunity to establish their status. "Hey, everyone is here." A man stood up and smiled at everyone. "Perhaps there are still people who don't know who I am. Then let me introduce myself. I'm He Tao, and I entered the sect 900 years ago." This guy is very, very strong, Ling Han thought in his mind. His aura wasn't obvious, but it was as deep as the sea. It was very likely that he had formed 5 mountains and rivers. That was why he had such a powerful aura. If this was the joint peace planet, Ling Han wouldn't think this way. However, this was the majestic heaven sect, and countless top-tier prodigies were gathered here. Moreover, Elder Hai Yun had said that including him, there were 7 seeds who had formed 5 mountains and rivers in the sect. This was only for the mountain river tier. If this was for the sun moon tier, there would definitely be more people. So he's He Tao. Among the seeds of the mountain river tier, his strength can easily rank in the top 5. Look, the one beside him is Wuxia. He's also a seed-level super elite, and can stand shoulder to shoulder with He Tao. In addition to Wu Wentong Shirangua, Shanzhuer and Kuang Peishan, they are collectively known as the 6 small kings. There were people conversing in low voices. After listening to them, Ling Han understood. These so-called 6 small kings were the elites among the mountain river tier disciples of the majestic heaven sect, who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Haha, we're here to taste tea and discuss Tao. Of course there must be tea, He Tao said with a smile. Then he took out a small stove from his spatial spirit tool, placed a teapot on it and started to boil. What he used wasn't ordinary flames, but rather flames that were spat out from his palm. There were divine patterns interweaving on them, and he actually used the laws of the great Tao as the source of the flames. Under this kind of divine flame, ordinary metals would definitely be immediately melted. Moreover, with his strength, it was likely that even level 4 godly metal could slowly be melted into molten iron. However, even though the cauldron looked small and unassuming, it was extremely resistant to fire. It was completely unaffected by the divine flames. This stove was not simple, Ling Han said in his mind. He had no intention of collecting this god tool. He only had a single thought in his mind. He wanted to destroy it, and use it to improve the quality of his divine demon sword. Logically speaking, with such a divine flame, the water in the furnace should be boiling very quickly. However, even after the time it took for an incense stick to burn had passed, there was still no steam coming out of the mouth of the furnace. It made one suspect that there was no water in the pot at all. What's inside is extreme night frost. If we want to melt it, it will take quite a long time, He Tao said with a smile. However, our tea tasting and Tao discussion will take at least 3 to 5 days. So let's discuss Tao first. We can drink tea later. What? Extreme night frost? A considerable number of people exclaimed in surprise. The others didn't know what it was, and only understood after someone explained it to them. Extreme night frost only forms in the extreme north of the flying cloud planet. That place is bone-piercingly cold, and is covered in ice and snow all year round. Beneath the ice and snow there are terrifying holes everywhere. Once one steps onto one of those holes, it is possible that they will fall into the holes and be sealed in ice forever. Even elites of the sun-moon tier are unwilling to go there because there aren't any precious godly medicines there, nor are there any extremely valuable demonic beasts. However, extreme night frost is an extremely rare specialty. It is formed from the special great Tao of the extreme north, and drinking its water can allow one to comprehend a sliver of the wonders of ice. Ordinary mountain river tier cultivators would be frozen into ice with just a touch. Even if they don't die, they will be severely injured. As expected of senior brother he actually managed to obtain extreme night frost. How astonishing! Although the prodigies didn't want to admit defeat, the truth was right before their eyes. If they didn't even have the courage to admit the gap between them, how could they possibly surpass their opponent? Thus, everyone looked at He Tao with admiration. He Tao smiled faintly. As he boiled water, he said, I was also lucky. I was chasing an extreme plain ice fox, and that's why I entered an ice cave and plucked a few pieces of extreme night frost. After some thought, I brought them back to brew some tea for my junior brothers and sisters. Someone was puzzled and whispered, it's such a small pot. Each of us can't even drink half a cup, right? The cup he was talking about was an extremely small teacup that could be drunk in a single sip. Don't worry, He Tao said with a smile. Although this pot isn't too big, I'm sure it's enough to drink. Wuxia interrupted and said, Brother, he contributed extreme night frost as tea, so I can't be stingy. Here are a few serene poplar tea leaves. We'll use them to brew tea later. Pooh! Many people spluttered and some even looked excited. The serene poplar tea could definitely be considered a treasure. It could help cultivators comprehend Tao, and even sun-moon tier elites might not be able to afford it. As expected of a king tier, anything he casually took out would make people speechless. Only the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping remained unmoved. What a joke. What were the serene poplar tea leaves worth? In terms of comprehending Tao, was it more impressive than the reincarnation tree? 1 day of comprehension was equivalent to 1 year of comprehension. Could this serene poplar tea achieve that? Moreover, one could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree every day. And how many serene poplar tea leaves were there? However, the tea leaves are limited, and there are only 10, Wuxia continued. Wuxia continued, how about this? The top 10 in this Tao sparring session can each bring a leaf with their tea. What do you think? Although all 10 tea leaves would eventually be placed in the teapot, and the tea would have a very good comprehension effect, would the effect be the same if they brought another leaf with them? Everyone nodded and rubbed their palms together. Since this was a Tao discussion, those who were more powerful in martial art would naturally benefit the most. This was also an unchanging truth in the world of martial art. Strength was king. I'm Xianjin. Which junior brother or junior sister would like to exchange pointers with me? A young man was the first to leap out, and the first thing he said was junior brother or junior sister. It was clear that he was brimming with confidence, and he believed that his strength was enough to be a senior brother. Hey, I'll go. Another young man leaped out. Please. The two of them bowed to each other, and immediately began to battle. The battle was very intense. Chapter 1152. Lan Luan was at the peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier, but the aura exuded by this blue-beaked bird had shockingly reached the medium extreme, or even the late stage, so its battle prowess was naturally even more terrifying. Everyone was shocked to see this. This was equivalent to raising his battle prowess by a small realm. The battle prowess of these people could surpass 5 stars at the very least. If they advanced another small realm, their battle prowess would soar to 9 stars. This was too shocking. However, the burden on Lan Luan to unleash such an attack was extremely great. Her beautiful face had already turned deathly pale while blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. Moreover, her life essence had suddenly dropped by a large amount. It was likely that this attack would even cut off his lifespan. This girl's desire to win was really strong. It was just a spar, but she actually severed her own lifespan. Even if she won, it would be killing 1,000 of her opponents, but losing 3,000 of her own. Ding Ping roared loudly as he moved to meet the attack, but as soon as his fists came into contact with the blue-beaked bird, his entire body was blasted flying, and he fell to the ground with a bang. Both his hands were severely injured, and both his arms were dripping with blood. Lan Luan was not in a much better state. She sat on the ground and was drenched in sweat. She gave off a weak aura. If her attack did not succeed, then there was no way she would be able to launch a second attack. She could only say that it was a Pyrrhic victory, but Ding Ping did not use his ultimate move. It was actually reasonable for him to be defeated by this ultimate move that consumed his life essence. After all, the two of them were in the same realm. The Rain Emperor leaped out, picked Ding Ping up, and brought him back to the side of the rock. He couldn't help but shake his head. Actually, he had hoped that Ding Ping would win, but this guy seemed to have fallen for Ding Ping. He didn't even use his ultimate move and insisted on taking Ding Ping's attack head-on. Wasn't he just asking to be defeated? After he put Ding Ping down, he strode off the stage and said, "Who wants to fight me?" He had relinquished his status as an emperor, but he had not relinquished his pride. In terms of aura, there were really not many people here that could compare to the Rain Emperor, even though his cultivation level was only in the early stage of the medium extreme. Haha, I'll do it. A green-robed youth leapt out. He was dressed in luxurious robes and wore many ornaments. Each ornament emitted an obscure aura, and was definitely extraordinary. This person was either a nouveau riche or his family was too noble, which was why he had so many accessories on his body. That's Chao Xian. Someone from the Chao Chao clan. That's right, that Chao clan. Hiss. The Chao clan was a large clan, and had produced a great elite of the Eternal River tier a very, very long time ago. They had been extremely glorious, but after that great elite had passed away, the Chao clan had no successor, and naturally could not recover their former glory. This Chao Xian was ambitious, and wanted to recreate the glory of the ancient ancestor. He indeed had astonishing talent, but was also too arrogant. He thought that there was no one here that could be his equal. At most, they could only become heavenly body tiers, while he was an existence that wanted to become eternal river tier. However, his present cultivation level was still relatively weak, and was only in the late stage of the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. After all, he was too young. He had only cultivated for close to 100 years, yet he had managed to reach this level. This was extremely astonishing. As his cultivation level soared, the Rain Emperor's appearance also became younger and younger. However, no matter how young he looked, he could not return to his teens or 20s. He now looked about 27 or 28 years old, and among this group of youngsters he appeared a bit old. It couldn't be helped. Though in terms of actual age, the Rain Emperor was younger than the majority, who asked him to be close to 60 years old when he broke through to the Flower Blossom tier. In the eyes of others, this was a sign that the Rain Emperor's talent was insufficient. Wasn't that so? Prodigies like them could break through to the Flower Blossom tier at the age of 7 or 8, and their bodies would only grow, and would not age in the slightest. What did aging mean? Your cultivation level could not keep up and a large amount of life essence was lost. Otherwise, how could you age? There was a smile on Chao Xian's face, but his heart was full of disdain. He was actually the same seed as this kind of trash. This was practically a humiliation to him. Fine, he would teach this person a good lesson. It would be best if he could make him withdraw from the sect of his own accord, lest he drag down his level. Move! He was very disrespectful to the Rain Emperor, and pressed down his palm, completely indifferent. The Rain Emperor attacked. Hong, a domineering aura radiated in all directions, and his fists shot out like rain. What? Chao Xian immediately looked shocked. He had not thought that the Rain Emperor's attack would be so swift and fierce. He was indeed very strong, but not necessarily stronger than the Rain Emperor. Thus, after the Rain Emperor seized the initiative, he naturally retreated step by step, and could only passively defend. How rich was the Rain Emperor's battle experience? It could be said that if the two of them had the same cultivation level and trump cards, even Ling Han would not be confident that he could defeat the Rain Emperor. Now that he had the upper hand, his attacks were endless, penetrating through every opening. Who could underestimate the Rain Emperor? He had advanced into the mountain river tier with the power of 19 stars. Though he had not cultivated it to perfection, the power of 1 star of the Shattering Void tier would at most have an effect of half a star in the mountain river tier, and definitely would not cause a world of difference. Pung 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 pung. The Rain Emperor attacked repeatedly, and Chao Xian retreated repeatedly. When he retreated for the 17th step, Chao Xian spat out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying by a punch. Thanks for letting me win. The Rain Emperor stopped. This was only a spar, so he naturally stopped when he overdid it. Chao Xian leaped up, his face already as red as a pig's liver. How could he accept this? He was completely disrespectful to the Rain Emperor, yet he was defeated by the Rain Emperor without even a chance to retaliate. This was practically a monument of shame on his path of martial art. As someone who was going to become an elite of the Eternal River tier in the future, how could he accept such a crushing defeat? Again, he leaped out. This time he did not dare to be careless. The light of Great Tao burst forth from his whole body, and divine patterns intertwined and appeared, pushing his battle prowess to the limit. Everyone shook their heads inwardly. You had already lost, yet were still so sore losers. That would only make others even more sore losers. Thus, talent was only one aspect. This was the prerequisite to becoming an elite, but to become an elite, talent alone was far from enough. But it had to be said that the present Chao Xian was extremely powerful, and definitely could not be underestimated. The Rain Emperor humphed coldly. He too was enraged. He could not afford to offend such a sore loser. Then he would explode. He shot out a fist and smashed it towards Chao Xian. Pung pung pung. One punch followed another. Though Chao Xian was prepared this time, he was still forced to retreat step by step. He was actually still completely suppressed. Hey, why is this guy's fist technique so terrifying? In terms of power, Chao Xian is still slightly superior. Why is he at a disadvantage in a head-on clash? That person's fist technique is too powerful. Every punch seems to be condensed with the power of heaven and earth. Hiss. He has the potential to become a grandmaster. Everyone here was knowledgeable, and all of them were incredibly shocked. The Rain Emperor's cultivation level could not be considered top-notch here, but in terms of fist technique, he had far surpassed the so-called seeds, reaching a height that others could only look up to. Second brother's fist technique is close to Tao. Haha, congratulations. Ling Han thought, a smile appearing on his face. He had seen the sword of Great Tao in the large tomb in the galaxy, and the Rain Emperor's fist technique similarly had the support of Great Tao, so its might was naturally astonishing. However, he had been inspired by the sword of Great Tao, and thus comprehended his own path, while the Rain Emperor had completely relied on his own comprehension ability. In comparison, even Ling Han could not help but feel impressed. This second brother of his was really a natural genius for martial art. Chapter 1153. The Rain Emperor was truly enraged. After 10 punches, Cao Xian was once again sent flying. Too strong. Their cultivation levels were clearly similar, and Cao Xian was even 2 subminor realms higher. However, he had been defeated within 10 moves. This was too unacceptable. It should be known that both of them were seeds and super geniuses. Since they were in the same realm, they should have been evenly matched. However, the result was completely one-sided. In fact, the Rain Emperor's cultivation level was slightly lower, and there was a difference of 2 stars of power. Ling Han, however, knew that the path that the Rain Emperor took was one that was firm, fierce, and domineering. If he could win, then about 10 moves would be enough, and if the battle dragged on for 10 moves or 100 moves, it meant that the Rain Emperor was actually at a disadvantage. Cao Xian had been defeated twice. His face was no longer the color of a pig's liver, but rather ashen. He didn't have the face to stay here any longer. He covered his face and left. If he stayed here any longer, everyone's gazes would be like blades, causing him to collapse. The Rain Emperor's fighting spirit soared, and he asked, "Who else wants to battle with me?" Everyone exchanged glances. Those whose cultivation level was the same as the Rain Emperor's had absolutely no confidence that they could defeat the Rain Emperor, and those whose cultivation level was higher than the Rain Emperor's would be too embarrassed to make a move. Previously, even Cao Xian, who was in the late stage of the medium extreme, had been easily defeated, so it was clear that the peak stage of the medium extreme was not enough. But if it was the high extreme, the gap was a little too wide. Who would have the nerve to take advantage of this? Thus, when the Rain Emperor requested for a battle, though there were over 100 people here, no one accepted his challenge. Hey, I can't let the atmosphere turn cold. How about this? I'll fight. Wuxia stood up. Everyone looked at each other. That was one of the 6 king tiers. If he were to make a move, who else could be a match for him other than He Tao? Moreover, the gap between their cultivation levels was too huge. Could this still be considered a spar? For the sake of fairness, I will seal my cultivation. We will fight at the same level. He patted himself a few times and sure enough, his aura immediately dropped to about the same level as the Rain Emperor. "Junior brother, this is fair," he said with a smile. The Rain Emperor didn't answer. He merely let out a battle cry, and his eyes blazed with fighting spirit as he unleashed a flurry of attacks at Wuxia. Pung 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 pung. His fists rained down like rain, and even someone as powerful as Wuxia could only parry as he was forced to retreat step by step. Everyone was overwhelmed with shock and stupefaction. That was Wuxia, one of the 6 publicly acknowledged king tiers. They could sweep aside all mountain river tier cultivators, and only the other 5 could be considered a match for them. However, now that they were battling at the same cultivation level, it was actually the Rain Emperor who was suppressing Wuxia. This was incredibly surprising. When the Rain Emperor also reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier in future, wouldn't there be 7 great king tiers then? Although Wuxia wore a faint smile on his face, he was cursing in his heart. He too had not expected that the Rain Emperor's fist technique would be so powerful. Previously, when he was watching the battle, he only felt that the Rain Emperor's fist technique was very ferocious, but when he faced it head-on, he discovered that the Rain Emperor's fist technique was very close to the heavenly Tao. When the Rain Emperor's fist landed, it was as if the heavens were suppressing him, and he was completely unable to resist. It wasn't that there was no way to fight back, but he had to crush them with power. But now their realms were the same and their strength was almost equal. What right did he have to crush them? He could not accept the result of being defeated, even if he had suppressed his cultivation. As a king, how could he lose in a battle of the same level? He suddenly shot out a punch, clashing head-on with the Rain Emperor. Bam! The two fists collided, and a terrifying shock wave instantly swept out. Even though everyone present was a seed-level prodigy, they had no choice but to activate their origin power shields. Otherwise, if they were even grazed by the shock wave, that would be a terrible feeling. Wuxia and the Rain Emperor retreated at the same time. Tung tung tung. Wuxia retreated 7 steps, while the Rain Emperor retreated 9 steps. In terms of power, he was at a slight disadvantage. However, the difference was that there was blood seeping out of the Rain Emperor's fist, and his arm was clearly dented. It was clear that all his bones had been broken. The Rain Emperor was completely defeated in this clash. As expected of senior brother Wu, the title of being one of the 6 great king tiers definitely isn't just a boast. He's invincible in a battle of the same cultivation level. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. This was the result that they had imagined. However, Ling Han's eyes turned cold as he stared at Wuxia. Just then, the number of divine patterns that had surged out of Wuxia's fist had reached as many as 91. This meant that although he hadn't used power above the medium extreme, he had used the power of regulations, which was even stronger. Of course it was unfair. Although power was the most important factor for cultivators, regulations were also not to be underestimated. For example, in the large galactic tomb, the power of the stone statue formation hadn't changed at all, but because the power of the divine patterns had increased, the power of the stone statue formation had also increased. This was originally impossible for a cultivator, but now Wuxia was using a higher cultivation level to fight a lower cultivation level. Under the condition that his power didn't change, he could increase the power of his divine patterns. The effect could be said to be exactly the same as that of the stone statue formation. Wuxia had done this very secretly, but how could he possibly hide it from Ling Han, who possessed the Eye of Truth? You dare to bully my second brother? Instantly Ling Han was filled with fury. He stared at Wuxia. He was definitely going to make him pay for this. The Rain Emperor was a straightforward person, and he had also sensed that something was off. However, a loss was a loss and there was no good excuse for it. Thus, he nodded and said, "I've lost." As he said this, he retreated to his original position and sat down. "I admit it." Wuxia pretended to be humble. "Senior brother Wu, please show me your moves." Ling Han was just about to enter the arena, yet he saw that someone was faster than him, and had already leaped into the arena. He could only temporarily give up on this idea. This person was Su Jing. "Please." Wuxia released the restriction on his cultivation level. His opponent was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so there was no need for him to deliberately suppress his cultivation level. "As a senior brother, I will limit myself to 10 moves. As long as junior brother Su can withstand 10 moves from me, it will be considered as my loss." These words were spoken with soaring confidence. However, it wasn't too much. If he didn't suppress his cultivation level, he possessed the power of 5 mountains and rivers, and his power was at least 7 stars. Although there was only a single star between 6 stars and 7 stars, this gap of 1 star was extremely large. Su Jing didn't dare to be careless. His opponent was a king tier of the mountain river tier, and he truly stood at the peak of this domain. His strength was beyond imagination. He immediately unleashed a powerful move. Boundless divine light wrapped around his body, and his body instantly turned into a volcano. There was blazing red lava surging all over his body, and scorching hot air blew from his nostrils. Was he still human? He was clearly a molten giant. Wuxia was calm and composed. Those who hadn't formed 5 mountains and rivers couldn't possibly know how powerful this cultivation level was. Putting aside the fact that it was only an additional star of power, this was the pinnacle level, and it was even more difficult to cultivate than the Sun-Moon tier. If he couldn't sweep aside all mountain river tier cultivators below him, then what was the point of cultivating the pinnacle level? Su Jing delivered a palm strike, and the sky was filled with blazing red flames. Lava spewed, and it was as if doomsday had arrived. Everyone hurriedly raised their origin power shields. This was the battle prowess of the consummate level, and could not be mentioned in the same breath as the previous battle. Boom boom boom. Su Jing launched consecutive attacks, while Wuxia casually parried them, appearing to be extremely careless and casual. 9 moves. Wuxia smiled and said, "Be careful, junior brother Su. I'm going to counterattack." Chapter 1154. Wuxia delivered a palm strike, and it was as if the sky was collapsing and a star was falling. Pung! Su Jing was instantly sent flying. Though he had once been hailed as a king tier of the younger generation, looking down on his peers, and even being able to trample on the mountain river tier elites of the older generation, he could only hold a grudge against a true king tier. After all, forming the 5th mountain river was a suppression of cultivation level. It was too powerful. However, it wasn't that Su Jing didn't have a chance to catch up or even surpass his opponent. As long as he could form the 5th mountain river, everything was possible. But before that, he could only admit defeat. "Senior brother Wu, I would also like to seek guidance." Xiao Sisi gracefully walked down. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. Why were all of them competing with him? "Forget it, you guys go ahead." When no one challenged Wuxia, he would make his move. Wuxia looked at Xiao Sisi, a stunned expression flashing across his eyes. Beautiful women were a kind of resource, but they were very ordinary. After all, the population of the immortal realm was really too large, and there would always be a few supreme beauties. However, a beauty with exceptional talent in martial art, the possibility of becoming a king tier, and a powerful clan background was definitely a rare resource. The beauty in front of him possessed all of these advantages, and naturally could make men fall for her. It could be said that even if her cultivation level was slightly inferior, and her talent was slightly inferior, she could still make groups of men fall for her skirt. "Junior sister, please." Wuxia's tone was gentle, fully displaying the gentleness of a senior brother. He Tao showed a cold smile. He naturally knew Wuxia's true colors, but he didn't believe that Xiao Sisi would be deceived by a few words from Wuxia. How could such a love-struck fool be heavily nurtured by her clan? "Senior brother, please be merciful." Xiao Sisi bowed, displaying the charm of a woman to the extreme. This kind of weakness naturally wouldn't be looked down upon by others. Instead, they would feel that she was well-behaved and respectful, which would increase their favorable impression of her. Many men couldn't take their eyes off her. Gan Shiyun was the only one who spat in her heart, because this was her usual trick. True enough, Wuxia's expression became even more composed, and his smile widened as he said, "Junior sister, please." Xiao Sisi's hand shook, and she actually took out a long spear. It was at least 10 meters long, and when she held it in her hands, it immediately gave her a heroic and beautiful aura. Coupled with her originally otherworldly beauty, it made her even more alluring. Even with Wuxia's mental fortitude, he still couldn't help but feel a jolt in his heart. As for the others, it was even more unbearable, and all of them gulped violently. "Go!" Xiao Sisi unleashed an attack on Wuxia. The spear spat out lightning, looking like a lightning dragon. It was extremely terrifying. Wuxia was slightly taken aback. His opponent's strength was truly not to be underestimated. If anyone thought that she was just a pretty face and was just a pretty face, then they would be gravely mistaken. As the spear stabbed forward, bolts of lightning emerged from the spear's body, transforming into numerous lightning snakes that spat out their fury towards Wuxia. "Interesting," Wuxia said with a smile. If he had not formed the 5th mountain river, he would really be flustered when faced with this attack. This woman could definitely become a formidable opponent for him, but now his strength was far above hers. Those who had not formed the 5th mountain river would definitely not be able to imagine how powerful this cultivation level was. He merely pushed out his right hand. Wang, a large navy blue hand of origin power appeared, grabbing out at the spear. Endless might swept out, and instantly suppressed Xiao Sisi's aura. Truly, one was not afraid of not knowing what was good, but of comparing goods. When Xiao Sisi had moved just now, everyone had been shaken. Who dared to underestimate this woman? But following Wuxia's powerful move, he immediately suppressed Xiao Sisi completely. This gap was really not just a little bit. Boom! The large hand pressed down, and the spear's momentum was instantly blocked. Then it even began to bend, as if it could not bear the huge force, and was about to break. Xiao Sisi gave a small shout, and endless lightning also surged on her body. Her power suddenly soared. Junior sister's strength and talent are both very extraordinary, but unfortunately, there is still a huge gap between us. Without forming the fifth mountain river, you are still immortal in the end. Wuxia stretched out a hand and pushed at the air. The large hands might instantly soared again, pushing back at Xiao Sisi. A terrifying power surged over, and Xiao Sisi hurriedly shook her right hand. The spear actually disintegrated on its own, but it did not break. Instead, it turned into a shield that protected in front of her, blocking this attack from Wuxia. As it turned out, her spear was not forged from a single godly metal, but rather from countless small chains locked together, and could change at will. Xiao Sisi's right hand shook, and the shield once again turned into a spear that shot out at Wuxia. Ha ha ha! Wuxia laughed loudly, completely unconcerned. His large hand continued to press down, and it was only a few moves, and he had already suppressed Xiao Sisi to the point where she had no choice but to admit defeat. Duan, Luo Jingren, Xiao Wuk and the others all stepped down to challenge him, but they were all easily defeated by Wuxia, fully displaying the might of a king tier. As expected of senior brother Wu, too powerful. So it turns out that mountain river tier cultivators can really form the fifth mountain river. I had always thought that this was only a rumor. No wonder senior brother Wu could become a king tier. Forming the fifth mountain river could practically be considered as the sun moon tier, and he would definitely be able to crush all other mountain river tier cultivators. I wonder if there is anyone who can take 10 moves from senior brother Wu. What a joke. Have you ever seen a mountain river tier cultivator take 10 moves from a sun moon tier cultivator? That's definitely impossible. Everyone sighed in praise, and did not conceal their admiration for Wuxia. Indeed, forming the fifth mountain river was really not easy. Yet Su Jing pondered for a moment and said, if it's only 10 moves, I think there is one person who can completely do it. Xiao Sisi's eyes immediately lit up and she said, that's right. Duan also nodded and said, if that person can also come, then it is really possible that senior brother Wu can use more than 100 moves. Everyone was astonished. Who was it that they were talking about that was actually able to obtain the unanimous praise of several seed geniuses? Oh, who is this person? Wuxia asked with a smile, but there was a sliver of disdain in the depths of his eyes. How laughable! Without forming the fifth mountain river, who could be a match for him for 10 moves? Ling Han, Xiao Sisi, Duan, Su Jing, and the others said in unison, perhaps even 100 moves won't be enough, and we'll have to drag it out for more than 1,000 moves. Even Xiao Wuk spoke up. This was slightly unexpected. He actually thought so highly of Ling Han. Wuxia couldn't help but feel annoyed. Even 1,000 moves couldn't be enough? What kind of joke was that? The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping exchanged a look. One revealed a faint smile, while the other was incredibly proud. Oh, and who is this Ling Han? Since he has been described so miraculously by our junior brothers and sisters, why don't we see him in the sect? Wuxia asked. Xiao Sisi shook her head and said previously when the large tomb in the galaxy opened, he entered with us, and even said that we would reunite in the majestic heaven sect. Who would have thought that he would disappear without a trace? How strange. Ha 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 ha. Several seeds instantly laughed loudly. After talking for so long, he didn't even have the right to enter the sect. How could he be called a genius? Let his opponent make 3 moves and let him use only one hand. This should have been his line, but now he was actually treated like this by a junior. He felt extremely humiliated. Junior brother, you asked for this. His eyes were cold and suddenly a blood-red color appeared. His skin instantly turned blood-red, and then his body suddenly swelled. The cloth on his hands immediately burst apart, revealing 2 furry claws. That's right, they weren't arms but claws. His 2 arms had now become tiger claws, and there were close to 70 divine patterns flickering on them, exuding a blood-red glow. What secret technique is this? Why do I feel that senior brother Zhang's strength has surpassed the level of the mountain river tier? Someone exclaimed in shock. He was obviously also a seed-level genius, but now his face was pale from the pressure of Zhang Long's aura. No, it has not surpassed the mountain river tier. The reason you have such a feeling is because your cultivation level is still a little low. This is a mystical technique that senior brother Zhang has cultivated, called the Great Ultimate Blood Tiger Technique. Once it is used, both his strength and speed will increase greatly. Senior brother Zhang has already cultivated to the peak stage of the mountain river tier, and his strength can surpass 6 stars. Now, with the addition of the Great Ultimate Blood Tiger Technique, it is very possible that his strength will leap to 7 stars. This is the power of the pinnacle level. A senior brother who had entered the sect long ago described Zhonglong's current state. He had not formed the 5th mountain river, but had broken through the limit of the 4 minor levels of the mountain river tier in another way. However, secret techniques ultimately had a time limit, and were not like those that had truly formed the 5th mountain river, where that power was permanent. Furthermore, could he not cultivate secret techniques just because he had formed the 5th mountain river? Zhonglong roared fiercely, and brandished his claws to attack Ling Han. Xiao! He was too fast. It was as if his whole person had turned into a flash of blood-red light, so fast that most of the cultivators in the consummate level of the mountain river tier could not catch a glimpse of him. Pung! They saw Ling Han move. With a flick of his left hand, he shot out a flash of sword qi. This strike was fast to the pinnacle. Hong! The attacks collided, forming a brilliant light that blinded the majority of the people. They could not see the battle clearly at all. However, the light soon dimmed. Ling Han stood proudly in the middle of the arena, his left arm flat. His index and middle fingers formed a sword, and there was a weak sword light flickering. Meanwhile, Zhonglong had fallen at Ling Han's feet, his face facing the sky. Fresh blood was gushing out of his chest. What? Someone as strong as Zhonglong had actually been defeated with a single strike. Everyone's eyes widened, and even their breathing had stopped. How was this possible? This was completely impossible. Some people wanted to clutch their heads and exclaim in shock, thinking that their eyes must have been playing tricks on them, and that they had mistaken the identities of the two parties. It must have been Zhonglong who had defeated Ling Han with a single strike. However, when they opened their eyes again, the scene had not changed in the slightest. Zhonglong lay on the ground already unconscious. Defeat, a complete and utter defeat. Ling Han kicked out and sent Zhonglong back to the rock he had been on. The strength of this kick was extremely ingenious, and Zhonglong just happened to be lying on the rock with his buttocks facing the sky and his arms dangling. That appearance would definitely be forever engraved in everyone's hearts. Gan Shiyun felt a chill rise from the bottom of her heart. Ling Han's strength had completely surpassed her imagination. Even Zhonglong had been easily defeated. Could it be that he had formed the 5th mountain river? That was really a natural chasm. Even a super sect like the Majestic Heaven sect, which had gathered the best prodigies from over 100 planets, only had 6 king tiers now. This kind of prodigy would definitely be viewed as a treasure by the sect, so how could she possibly have any hope of revenge? Ling Han cast a cold glance at her. Zhonglong had chosen to challenge him, so it was obvious that Gan Shiyun could not escape the connection. Gan Shiyun felt as if even her soul had trembled, and she hurriedly lowered her gaze, not daring to meet Ling Han's eyes. Hehe. I really did not think that junior brother Han would actually be so strong. Wuxia said with a smile as he clapped his hands. There was a strong hint of wariness in his eyes. He did not dare to underestimate even Zhonglong, because it was very possible that the latter had formed the 5th mountain river, and once again caught up to him. Then wasn't this man who had defeated Zhonglong even more frightening? Ling Han broke into a smile and said, Brother Wu, can you teach me a move or two? Chapter 1157. Although Brother Wu and Senior Brother Wu only differed by a single word, the meaning they represented was completely different. Senior Brother Wu was a respectful form of address, because he admitted that his strength was inferior. As for Brother Wu, that was a polite form of address because he definitely did not think that he was weaker than the other. For example, He Tao and Wuxia addressed each other as brother, and neither of them addressed the other as senior brother. As for those who addressed themselves as junior brother, that was because they both thought that they were stronger, so how could they lower their status? But that was He Tao and Wuxia, 2 of the 6 king tiers. Did you, Ling Han, have such qualifications? Wuxia's expression darkened, and he showed his displeasure. This brat thought that he could challenge him just because he defeated Zhonglong. He was wary of Zhonglong not because of his current strength, but because of his talent. In the future, he might stand on equal footing with him. In terms of strength, he naturally could crush Zhonglong. Forming 5 mountains and rivers was a qualitative improvement. He Tao smiled faintly. He was still boiling tea with his divine flame, appearing very calm. Junior brother Han, you seem to be a little too arrogant, Wuxia said coldly. Junior brother Wu, I think it's better to address me as senior brother. That way, it'll be justifiable even if you lose, Ling Han said with a smile. Who? Everyone's mouths gaped open. They already knew that Ling Han was arrogant, but they had never imagined that he would be so direct. They were all disciples of the majestic heaven sect, so why did he have to go so overboard? If he lost this battle, would he still be able to survive in the sect in the future? Targeted by Wuxia, one of the 6 king tiers, who would dare to befriend him? Could Ling Han win? Probably, aside from die-hard loyalists like Hu Feiyun. Basically no one believed that Ling Han could defeat Wuxia. Although Ling Han had just defeated Zhonglong, Wuxia had defeated Su Jing, Duan and other supreme prodigies. Moreover, he was one of the 6 king tiers. This glory was enough to make others completely believe in him. In the sect, no one could challenge the position of the 6 king tiers. No one understood why Ling Han seemed to have a grudge against Wuxia, and actually targeted him like this. They really had not guessed wrongly. Ling Han was a person who was too protective of his own. The other had just schemed against the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han pretend that he did not notice? Naturally, he was going to get revenge for this loss. Junior brother Han, you're really interesting. Wuxia's face was ashen, and he stretched out his right hand. Wang. His hand instantly turned pure gold, as if it had been forged from divine gold. Previously, his attacks had been extremely casual. But now, he had unleashed his ultimate move even before the fight had even begun. Naturally, he was truly enraged. Of course, it was also because Ling Han was strong enough to defeat Zhonglong with a single move. Even Wuxia did not dare to be careless against such strength. Similarly, Ling Han did not dare underestimate this opponent. It was one thing for him to trick the Rain Emperor, but that did not mean that he could deny Wuxia's strength. Ling Han's physique was enough to make him invincible, but he didn't want to use this method to defeat his opponent. He was seeking justice for the Rain Emperor, so he naturally had to obtain a hearty victory. Junior brother Wu is not interesting at all. Why are you showing off instead of calling me senior brother? Ling Han said with a smile. Have you had enough? Wuxia roared in fury. Wang. This roar became tangible, and the sound waves were visible to the naked eye. Instantly, multiple golden ripples rolled out in all directions. Pung 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 pung. At least half of the people directly fell off the rocks. The might of a single roar was already so powerful. Everyone was stunned. Wuxia had probably not even used 30% of his full strength just then. Oh no, how is Ling Han going to block this? Ling Han stood proudly. The sound waves only caused the corners of his robes to flutter, and his hair to flutter slightly. How could it possibly injure him? He calmly said, reason does not depend on the louder one's voice. No matter how loud you shout, junior brother is junior brother. You can't change that. Wuxia was driven mad with fury. He pounced and finally couldn't help but take the initiative to attack Ling Han. Theoretically speaking, in this kind of spar, a senior brother would definitely have to be modest. This was also why he hadn't made a move even though he was clearly enraged previously. That was to maintain his dignity, but now he was so enraged by Ling Han that he forgot everything, and only wanted to trample on this detestable guy. However, he was really powerful, incredibly powerful. Forming the 5th mountain river was the pinnacle level. Countless golden rays descended from the sky, turning into multiple blades that slashed down towards Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his right hand, forming a barrier above his head. A terrifying origin power surged, exuding an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Wuxia's. Pung 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 pung. The golden sword shot down, but not a single one was able to break through Ling Han's origin power barrier. And at this moment Wuxia had already pounced. His fist smashed down, and it was like a great star falling, causing even the heaven and earth to lose their color. Ling Han's competitive spirit was greatly aroused. and he similarly raised his fist, meeting his opponent's attack. Pung, the two fists collided, and a dazzling light instantly exploded out. A shock wave spread out, and those who had just sat back down were once again sent flying. This time they were even more wretched, and they all fell off the mountain peak. Thankfully, the mountain peak was not steep, so they only fell a short distance before falling to the ground. Yet this clash of fists between Wuxia and Ling Han was not over yet. Both sides were bursting with power, wanting to crush the other. Zzz. Endless power appeared in the form of light, ceaselessly, and the deafening sound was also like thunder, as if the heavens were collapsing. Pung, finally, both of their figures trembled, and this clash of fists ended. Wuxia was sent flying, and with a flip, he landed firmly on the ground, while Ling Han took a slight retreat of 7 steps, and also steadied his stance. Who had the upper hand? Everyone was confused. It seemed like the clash had ended in a tie. Ling Han frowned slightly. After all, he had just advanced to the pinnacle level, and in terms of power alone his opponent was slightly superior to him, but not by much. Then, in a situation where their power was about the same, it would depend on whose secret technique was stronger, and whose natural talent in battle was higher. Wuxia's expression instantly became incredibly grave, and he said, "No wonder you are so arrogant. So it turns out that junior brother Han has also cultivated to the pinnacle level." What? Everyone felt their scalps go numb. This overbearing guy had actually formed 5 mountains and rivers as well? No wonder he could challenge Wuxia. Both of them stood at the true pinnacle of the mountain-river tier. "Then let's fight with all our strength," Wuxia shouted loudly and stretched out his hands. They actually continuously stretched out, becoming narrower, and turning into 2 golden blades. The blades were covered with divine patterns, and there were as many as 79 of them. He roared loudly and charged at Ling Han. His 2 sword arms continuously danced and slashed out a frightening sword chi. Ling Han did not show weakness either. Using his finger as a sword, he met his opponent's attack. Ding 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 ding. They continuously exchanged blows. They were clearly only made of flesh and blood, but in their clash, the sound of metal clashing rang out, causing others to grit their teeth. What kind of freakish level had these 2 people cultivated their physiques to? But no one was as shocked as Wuxia. Chapter 1158. A Beautiful Romance. Wuxia naturally knew that his arm could transform into a divine sword, because of the cultivation technique he cultivated. However, this cultivation technique couldn't be used continuously. Otherwise, his body would suffer permanent damage. However, Ling Han showed no signs of using the cultivation technique at all. It was as if his physique was naturally as tough as godly metal. This was too terrifying. Was there really such a monster in this world? He took a deep breath. His opponent was a little more powerful than he had expected. He waved his arm sword and softly shouted, "To the ends of the world, to the depths of the yellow springs, to slay all heroes in this world." Boom! Sword light shot out from his body, and his aura instantly rose to a whole new level. "I am the sword," he attacked, slashing at Ling Han. Every strike was large and powerful, and he wanted to use his supreme sword intent to slash Ling Han in half. Ling Han raised a finger to parry. Since his opponent wasn't using a precious tool, he wouldn't use his divine demon sword either. He was going to overwhelm his opponent in all aspects and make Wuxia speechless. Suppress. Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity, affecting his opponent's movements. At the same cultivation level, even Wuxia would be affected. The only difference was that the effect was limited. He staggered but immediately steadied himself and continued to attack Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled and used his divine patterns of gravity to parry. Even if it only affected Wuxia a little, it would still be very influential in a battle between elites. Wuxia was indeed very unhappy. The divine patterns of gravity didn't affect him much, but they would cause his attacks to deviate slightly every time. This made him extremely unhappy. In battle, one's state of mind was very important. However, after using his ultimate move, his battle prowess had indeed risen to a whole new level, and he was showing signs of suppressing Ling Han. Ling Han was also as arrogant as fire. His finger was like a sword, and the divine patterns of flame were activated as well. His right hand was instantly wrapped in blazing flames. These weren't ordinary flames, but the regulations of the great Tao that could burn godly metal. Wuxia frowned deeply. This kind of divine flame made even him feel pressure. Ling Han was much younger than him, so how could he inscribe so many regulations of the great Tao in his body? He couldn't lose. Wuxia's fighting spirit soared. He was one of the 6 great king tiers, so how could he lose to a king tier? Even if he lost, he wouldn't be able to stand on equal footing with them. Do! He shouted softly, and the sound wave transformed into a sword that slashed at Ling Han. Ling Han casually threw a punch. Pa, and the sword shattered. But he felt a pain in his mind as if he had been pierced by a needle. Of spiritual attack. Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue. He hadn't thought that his opponent had only used sound waves as a cover, and his true killing move was an attack that came from his divine sense. However, Ling Han would never have expected that his divine sense had been cultivated to an incredibly stable level. His divine sense had been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and just like his physique, it had surpassed his cultivation level by a minor level. What? Wuxia finally revealed an expression of astonishment when he saw that his spiritual attack had been ineffective. What he had just used was the Annihilation Shock Wave, an extremely profound spiritual attack technique, and a secret technique of the Majestic Heaven sect. He had only been taught this secret technique because he had reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. Otherwise, no matter how much of a prodigy he was, he would not have been taught this secret technique. Ling Han had just entered the sect, so of course, it was impossible for him to be taught the Annihilation Blast Wave. Even if he was taught it, it would only improve the offensive power of his divine soul, not the defensive power. He had used a stern shout to conceal the mental attack, causing the other party to take a solid hit, but the other party was completely unscathed. This was too unbelievable. What kind of freak is that? Ling Han smiled and said, "This sneak attack is not bad. I'll give you 9 points. 1 point less is to prevent you from becoming arrogant." Fuck, do you really think you're my senior? Wuxia's face was cold. In the end, he drew a god artifact. It was a slightly damaged sword. There were a few obvious damages on it, and it radiated with an ancient presence. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, he said solemnly. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. A few people immediately exclaimed. That's the precious treasure of the Wu clan. It said that it was once used by the ancestor of the Wu clan. Both he and the sword died in the final battle, but the treasured sword absorbed the soul of the ancestor of the Wu clan. If one cultivates with the sword, they can comprehend the sword intent of the ancestor of the Wu clan. In the past, the ancestor of the Wu clan was a supreme elite of the heavenly body tier. Legend has it that he was a freak who could exchange a few blows with an eternal river tier elite. No wonder senior brother Wu's sword intent is so powerful. So it turns out that he has inherited the 3 clouds 3 flower sword. This was definitely not a replica, but an authentic one. You should be proud that you forced me to draw the 3 clouds 3 flower sword, Wuxia said. Ling Han laughed and said, no matter what you draw, you will still be defeated today. It's not good to be so confident. You'll be slapping yourself in the face later. Wuxia pounced, brandishing his sword to attack. As his sword swept past, countless clouds and flowers appeared. Ling Han felt as if he had entered another world. There were flowers and clouds everywhere, but he only moved slightly, and these clouds and flowers exuded a sinister killing intent. It was incredibly terrifying. Every step was thorny and every step was dangerous. Ling Han was unafraid. Even if this really was a high-grade god tool, it would depend on who wielded it. Although Wuxia had formed 5 mountains and rivers, it was clear that he had not reached the pinnacle. Thus, he could not possibly possess the power of the Sun-Moon tier. His physique determined that he would definitely have the last laugh. The only difference was whether it would be easier or more difficult. His right hand shook, and the divine demon sword appeared. Instantly, a murderous aura soared into the sky. The devouring metal could break through to divine metal in the future. Even if its current level was not high, its foundation was there. Moreover, it had experienced the tempering of several heavenly tribulations, and Ling Han's Tao had been engraved on it. One was his own Tao, while the other was a broken tool of who knew how many tens of thousands of years ago. Could they be the same in terms of proficiency? Instantly, the divine demon sword exuded a brilliant light, its divine might astonishing. The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping both leaped to their feet, expressions of excitement on their faces. As soon as they saw the divine demon sword, they naturally guessed Ling Han's identity. They also understood why he wanted to pick a fight with Wuxia. That was because Wuxia had wounded the Rain Emperor. Moreover, his methods weren't very honorable. With Ling Han's protective personality, how could he possibly let the matter rest? The two swords clashed, and a great collision occurred between the intents of martial art. Multiple divine patterns appeared, transforming into chains of regulations that danced in the sky. If the Three Clouds Three Flower sword was still in its original state, then the divine demon sword would definitely be no match for it. After all, it was only a seedling, and was far from reaching the level of divine metal. Now, however, the Three Clouds Three Flower sword was broken. If it were not for the fact that it was still fused with the soul of the Grand Elder of the Wu clan, it would only be a piece of scrap metal. This divine demon sword just so happened to be evenly matched with the divine demon sword. Chapter 1160. Boom boom boom. Ling Han swung his fists in anger. He had to force Wuxia to admit defeat. This was what he owed the Rain Emperor. It had to be said that seeds were all supreme prodigies, and Wuxia was a king among seeds. His strength was incredibly powerful. Ling Han had cultivated every cultivation level to perfection, but he wasn't the only one in this world who could do this. At least Wuxia was also a prodigy like this. If Ling Han hadn't formed his fifth mountain river, then no matter how freakish he was, he would only be able to take a beating in front of Wuxia. But even now, there was no obvious difference in their strength. However, Ling Han possessed a physique that was truly invincible among his peers. This was a huge advantage, and it allowed him to have fewer qualms when he attacked. He could focus more of his power on offense. In contrast, though Wuxia had used a secret technique and could injure Ling Han, this definitely couldn't last for long. The two of them clashed and blood spurted out. Heavens, so the mountain river tier can be this powerful. In comparison, I'm like a small cultivator who hasn't even reached the mountain river tier yet. I definitely have to form my fifth mountain river. Everyone hugged their heads and exclaimed in shock. Many people even made the decision to not break through to the Sun Moon tier until they formed their fifth mountain river. This had a huge impact on the majestic heaven sect. That was because among this group of people, there were indeed a few who formed their fifth mountain river and had outstanding battle prowess. However, most of them were stuck at the mountain river tier for the rest of their lives, and they didn't even have the chance to reach the Sun Moon tier. After all, even for seed-level prodigies, the fifth mountain river was still far beyond their reach. Ling Han roared endlessly. He used his sword Tao, combining the fast technique with the sword of the great Tao. Not only was he extraordinarily fast, but he also possessed terrifying destructive power. This was his own Tao, and he called it the lightning sword technique. It was named lightning because lightning was the fastest in the world, and the might of lightning was also incredibly terrifying. It was compatible with his Tao, just like the Rain Emperor's Son of Heaven fist technique. As his cultivation level increased, the might of the lightning sword technique would also increase. Because this wasn't a fixed technique but rather a kind of concept, a kind of comprehension of the great Tao. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ling Han wielded the divine demon sword, and he became one with the sword, elevating the might of his lightning sword technique to a whole new level. Wuxia groaned in pain. He was already struggling to deal with Ling Han alone, much less when there was still the divine demon sword. This was a god tool that Ling Han had nurtured, and it was in perfect harmony with him. Thus he could maximize the might of the divine demon sword. He was suppressed, from returning 5 moves out of 10 to returning 1 move out of 10. In the end, he was only left with the power to defend. Everyone knew that even though he hadn't admitted defeat, he had already lost. He had lost and there was no excuse at all. In a battle of the same level, one's strength was inferior. Everyone fell silent. However, many people looked excited. Wuxia and the others had already occupied the position of king tiers of the mountain river tier for far too long. It was time for new elites to rise up and challenge their positions. And the person who had blown the horn to charge was none other than Ling Han. The new disciples were all ambitious in the first place, and now that they had been inspired by Ling Han, they were all filled with confidence. They were filled with desire for the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier because as long as they could reach this level, they would be able to challenge the old king tiers like Ling Han and replace them. Ling Han's battle had begun the prelude to the toppling of empires. After a few more exchanges, Wuxia was sent flying by Ling Han's sword, leaving behind an extremely deep wound on his chest. This was still because Ling Han had held back. Otherwise, he would have been sliced in half at the waist. This was only a spar, and Ling Han was only seeking justice for the Rain Emperor. The two of them weren't mortal enemies. However, having been defeated in public, Wuxia would definitely hate Ling Han from now on. Wuxia glared at Ling Han hatefully, and suddenly turned to leave, not caring that the tea tasting and Dao discussion had yet to end. Junior brother Wu, where are the tea leaves? Ling Han asked with a smile. Since there was already enmity, he didn't mind deepening it further. Wuxia's footsteps paused, and he didn't even look back. He raised his hand, and 10 sparkling and translucent tea leaves were tossed out. These were the 10 serene poplar tea leaves that he had promised. However, he hadn't tossed them to Ling Han but to He Tao. He continued to walk and soon descended the mountain peak. His figure disappeared into the swirling clouds. Ling Han clapped his hands indifferently and returned to his original position. He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. His expression was calm, but a strong sense of wariness rose up in his heart toward He Tao and the other king tiers. In terms of battle prowess alone, he really wasn't much stronger than Wuxia. However, he had the divine demon sword and this god tool was extremely powerful. Even though it hadn't reached level 4, it had already displayed extraordinary might. Secondly, his physique was far too powerful, and he could largely ignore his opponent's attacks. However, what if there were some secret techniques or god tools that could target his physique? At least, his physique wasn't invincible before he reached Saint King tier. He couldn't become one of the little 6 kings after winning a single match. Once it was a life and death battle. Who knew how many trump cards the little 6 kings still had? Who knew what kind of terrifying brilliance they could unleash? Of course, Ling Han was only being cautious, and didn't dare to be careless. However, he still had the confidence that he was invincible. Ding Ping's face was filled with excitement as he looked at his master. Too powerful. His master was like this, always giving him surprises. Just then, he had said that he wasn't qualified to enter the majestic heaven sect, and he had jumped out with a bang. Just then, he had said that the little 6 kings were invincible, and yet Wuxia had been defeated. He definitely had to use Ling Han as a role model. He didn't seek to surpass his master, but he definitely couldn't embarrass his master and weaken his master's reputation. The sparring continued. However, after witnessing the battle between Ling Han and Wuxia, everyone felt that the following battles were extremely boring. The people here were boring, and the people who fought were naturally also boring. Soon no one dared to challenge them anymore. Instead, they began to discuss martial art. The people here were all geniuses, and none of them could be perfect in all aspects. Instead, they all had their own strengths. Thus, even a cultivator in the low extreme could give a unique opinion, causing the others to nod in agreement. The atmosphere became more and more lively. Everyone didn't hide anything, and shared their own insights with the others. Of course, it was impossible for them to share their secret techniques and martial techniques with others. That wouldn't be generous but idiotic. Ling Han also benefited greatly. His lightning sword technique was derived from his understanding and destruction of the Great Tao. Thus, everyone's comprehension of the Great Tao could bring him inspiration and inspiration. He also generously shared some of his insights, but the core parts such as the lightning sword technique were definitely not taught. Hehe, the water is finally ready. Everyone, let's drink some tea, He Tao said with a smile. He Tao said with a smile. Finally, hot air floated out of the small kettle. The strange thing was that the hot air gathered together and did not dissipate. Instead, it formed all sorts of strange shapes, as expected of divine water. Just this kettle alone was priceless. Chapter 1161. From a certain perspective, He Tao and Wuxia were quite good. At the very least, they had taken out truly good things for their junior brothers and sisters. If it weren't for the fact that Wuxia was too competitive and defeated the Rain Emperor with a dirty trick, Ling Han wouldn't have challenged him and made him leave with resentment. Ling Han asked around, and found out that the other 4 king tiers had all gone to explore. In the Majestic Heaven sect, the relationship between the disciples was still quite good. When the senior brothers and sisters went out adventuring, and obtained some good things, they would share them with the junior brothers and sisters who had just entered the sect. This was a tradition. When the other 4 king tiers returned, they would also take out some greeting gifts for Ling Han and the others. Generation after generation, this became a very good tradition. Everyone decided on the 10 most outstanding figures in the Dao debate, and the tea they drank would have an additional serene pooling tea leaf. Ling Han was naturally one of them. If he wasn't qualified, who was? The Rain Emperor also received this special honor. But Ding Ping didn't. He lost to Lan Luan, and no matter what the reason was a loss. This showed that his mental state wasn't perfect yet. Brother Han, are you interested in exploring an ancient land? He Tao came over and invited Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but smile, and said, I wonder what kind of ancient land it is? It should be a large sect from ancient times. It seems like its teachings were destroyed, but there are still many valuable things left behind. He Tao said seriously. He knew that he wouldn't be able to move Ling Han if he didn't say something substantial. Ling Han said, with Brother He's ability, there doesn't seem to be a need to drag me along, right? He Tao chuckled and said, there's a treasure trove that can only be opened by the combined power of 7 people. Moreover, they have to be at the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han was astonished. Opening a treasure trove required such a high requirement? This ancient sect was really awesome. One had to realize that even though the Majestic Heaven sect had gathered the most prodigies from over 100 galaxies, only 7 people in this generation had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Then I can take a look. Ling Han's interest was piqued. When do we set off? He didn't ask where this ancient land was. Otherwise it would be too inconsiderate. He Tao laughed and said, there's no rush. This ancient land is actually in the hands of the sect. It's a secret realm that only opens once every 100 years. But it won't be long, within half a year. For gods, half a year was a very short time. The sect has wanted to open that treasure trove for a very long time, but the cultivation level of those who enter is limited, and they have to be in the mountain river tier. But before this, there were only 6 people who managed to form 5 mountains and rivers. Thus, every time, they could only sigh when they passed by that treasure trove. He Tao said, if it weren't for this, Shenjur Shurangua and Wu Wentong would have broken through to the sun-moon tier decades ago. However, they still had a sliver of hope, so they suppressed their cultivation levels and planned to break through after the opening of the ancient land. Now that Brother Han has appeared, there is hope for the ancient land to open. Ling Han was surprised and said, in other words, Shan Shi and Wu have all cultivated the 5th mountain river to a perfect level. Gasp! This was a power of 10 stars, comparable to the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. He Tao smiled faintly and said, at least these 3 have already reached this level. Kuang Peishan formed his 5th river a dozen or so years ago, but I wonder how he's doing now. Forming the 5th mountain meant that one's power would advance to 7 stars, and cultivating it to perfection would advance to 8 stars. Forming the 5th river meant that one's power would advance to 9 stars. Ling Han was curious and he asked, what about Brother He? He Tao smiled and after a while he said, he's slightly weaker than the 4 of them. He only formed his 5th river a few days ago. Gasped! The power of 9 stars. In comparison, Wuxia was the weakest, and his 5th mountain definitely hadn't been cultivated to perfection. Otherwise, he should be able to suppress Ling Han in terms of power, and not just have a slight advantage. As expected of king tiers. So powerful. Ling Han didn't dare to underestimate the 6 kings in the first place, and now that he heard He Tao's words, he naturally took them more seriously. However, he wouldn't be fearful because of this. After all, he also had powerful trump cards, so there was no need to be afraid. Everyone sipped their tea and continued to discuss Dao. Good tea paired with good water allowed everyone to immerse themselves in the great Tao. At this time, everyone's genius side was on full display. Divine light rose from almost everyone's body, and they could feel the regulations of the great Tao. Naturally, this was the effect of the serene poplar tea. However, there were some exceptions such as Ling Han. He didn't have anything on him at all. It couldn't be helped. They were all people who had drunk the reincarnation tea, so what effect could mere serene poplar tea have? Ling Han didn't have any, and neither did he Tao. Obviously, he had either drunk it long ago, or had drunk a more effective divine tea. For example, this kind of tea would have the best effect the first time it was drunk, and it would be worse after that. The two of them exchanged a look and both smiled. In their hearts they thought of each other even more highly. Wang! Suddenly a terrifying aura swept over as if a demon god had descended, causing everyone to feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Who was it? Everyone was stunned. This was an important place of the majestic heaven sect, so who would dare come here and show off? A white-robed man walked over, his hands clasped behind his back. The wind on the mountain peak blew his long robe and hair, and there was an indescribable elegance to him. This was a supremely handsome man. His face was as smooth as jade, and his figure was tall and slender. He was the type that could cause resentful women to scream with a single glance. Lord Yang! Many people exclaimed in surprise. Even though they were all seeds, they still wore expressions of awe and veneration when they saw this young man. Yang Hao was a prodigy among prodigies, and he had used a mere 600 years to cultivate to the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, he was able to defeat those at the same cultivation level as him. All prodigies were merely stepping stones in front of him, used to show off his greatness. No one knew exactly what cultivation level he was at now. They only knew that he had definitely improved greatly again. The Sun-Moon tier and Mountain River tier were two completely different cultivation levels. Even if one cultivated to the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier, he would only be able to match the lowest level of the Sun-Moon tier. Greetings, Lord. Many people stood up and bowed respectfully to Yang Hao. In the majestic heaven sect, if a disciple had a higher cultivation level, they would address him as Lord, and not as senior uncle or something like that. He Tao's expression didn't change. He was about to cultivate to the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. With a prodigy like him, he could even advance to the pinnacle level, so breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier was naturally a piece of cake. Thus he didn't fear Yang Hao that much. However, strength was the most important thing in the world of martial art. As long as he didn't advance to the Sun-Moon tier, he would be inferior to Yang Hao. Thus he wouldn't provoke Yang Hao. Yang Hao exuded a domineering aura, and he was like a demon lord. Anyone could only kowtow before him. His eyes swept over the crowd and he calmly asked, "Who is Han Lin?" Chapter 1162. Who was Han Lin? Yang Hao had come to find Ling Han. Many people didn't know what was going on, and they thought that Yang Hao had come to recruit Ling Han after hearing that Ling Han had defeated Wuxia. However, people like Gan Shiyu knew that Yang Hao definitely wasn't here to recruit Ling Han. She was overjoyed. Yang Hao had finally made a move. Zhang Long couldn't deal with Ling Han, but what about Yang Hao? If Ling Han could really oppose Yang Hao, then she definitely wouldn't oppose Ling Han in this lifetime. She would avoid him whenever she saw him in the future. Ling Han didn't cower. He stood up and said, "I'm Han Lin. What can I do for you?" Yang Hao stared at him for a moment, then said, "I'll give you two choices. One, kowtow to me and apologize. Since you killed my follower, you'll be my follower from now on. Two, I'll beat you every time I see you until you leave the sect. At that time, I'll personally kill you." Gasp! Everyone was stunned. They had thought that Ling Han had a boundless future ahead of him, and there was a chance that he would become the strongest disciple of the majestic heaven sect. However, the tables had turned in the blink of an eye. He had offended Yang Hao. Listen, he could either submit and become Yang Hao's dog, or be humiliated and die if he left the sect. Although Yang Hao had put it nicely, saying that he would only kill Ling Han after he left the sect, and he didn't break any rules of the sect, everyone knew that Yang Hao would definitely kill Ling Han once he left the sect. Did Ling Han still have a future ahead of him? What's your choice? Yang Hao asked calmly. Ling Han shook his head and said, I'm sorry, but I don't like either of these choices. It's not important whether you like them or not. What's important is that these are the choices I'm giving you, so you have to choose, Yang Hao said domineeringly. He indeed had the right to do so. I choose the third choice, Ling Han said with a smile. When I advance to the Sun Moon tier and reach the same cultivation level as you, it'll be time for you to choose. Everyone wanted to vomit blood. It's bad enough that you offended Yang Hao, yet you still provoked him recklessly. However, Ling Han did not mind at all. Would Yang Hao let him go after he lowered his stance? Of course not. Such a person was full of himself and thought that everyone in the world should submit to him. Once he had made up his mind, how could he change it? If that was the case, why should he humble himself? Yang Hao sneered. You're really stubborn. However, that's exactly what I wanted. He stretched out his hand. Wang. Divine imprints condensed, and instantly, heaven and earth lost their color. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. So strong. So strong. In front of him, the so-called 6 kings were nothing but a joke. He was the king, the unparalleled king. Ling Han shivered and said, in the sect, you, a Sun Moon tier elite, have the nerve to attack me? So what? Yang Hao didn't seem to care at all. His palm slammed down on Ling Han. Boom, he stretched out his hand and pressed down. A giant elemental energy hand appeared out of thin air and descended from the sky. There was nothing fancy about this palm strike, nor was there any secret technique. It was just a simple press. However, the might of this press was as great as the heavens. Even He Tao's expression changed. He knew that he definitely wouldn't be able to withstand this palm strike. There was an insurmountable gulf between the Mountain River tier and the Sun Moon tier. Only those with power of 10 stars could break through this gulf. However, that was only enough to rival the lowest level of the Sun Moon tier. Who was Yang Hao? Even if he had just advanced to the Sun Moon tier, so what? He was a super prodigy in the first place. There was a gap of a major cultivation level between them, so who could oppose him? No matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't oppose him. However, did he want to humiliate him? No way. Ling Han retrieved the lion seal. Shui Yinyu had naturally returned the lion seal and Vajra seal to him. Wang. Instantly Ling Han's power skyrocketed, and he instantly rushed to the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier. However, a divine seal was only a divine seal after all. This peak stage was the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, and not the pinnacle level. Pung. Ling Han punched out. Similarly, a giant flaming fist soared into the sky and landed on the giant elemental hand. Boom! The giant hand was shattered, and the flaming fist soared into the sky, exuding a terrifying aura. Oh! Yang Hao's expression changed slightly, and he said, I didn't think that you would have another divine seal. However, this only boosts your power to the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. You want to stop me with this? He took a step forward, and a terrifying power instantly seeped out of his body, intertwining to form innumerable divine patterns that were incredibly dazzling. I reached the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier 12 years ago, he said proudly. Hearing this, everyone almost fainted. What kind of cultivation speed was this? It was practically terrifying. The #1 prodigy. He was definitely the #1 prodigy since the founding of the majestic heaven sect. All in all, it couldn't have been more than 1,000 years, and he had already soared from the shattering void tier to the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Moreover, he had truly cultivated every cultivation level to a perfect level. The word prodigy was insufficient to describe him. Ling Han's heart trembled. Although his power had reached the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier, he didn't have the ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level. Meanwhile, Yang Hao was definitely a 10-star genius, so he had 10 stars of power on top of the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Even if it was only at the early stage, that was still 3 stars of peak power. This was a crushing power. 3 stars of power? That should be enough to make up for it. Destroy! Yang Hao moved, and a streak of light shot out from his finger toward Ling Han. Ling Han punched out. Pung, this streak of light was annihilated. This power didn't seem to surpass his by 3 stars. Ling Han was puzzled. The power of Yang Hao's strike was only on par with his, and no matter what, it didn't surpass his power by 3 stars. Could it be that he hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier? But was that possible? He was hailed as the #1 prodigy of the majestic heaven sect, yet he hadn't even reached the mountain river tier, the relatively easiest pinnacle level. Ling Han roared and took the initiative to attack. He engaged in an intense battle with Yang Hao. Yang Hao humped softly but didn't dare to be careless. After a few exchanges, Ling Han could confirm that his power was definitely not inferior to his opponent's. In fact, it should be said that their power was basically the same. He was even more puzzled, and he couldn't help but use his mind to communicate with the Black Tower, asking Notionless Saint for guidance. "You foolish brat." Notionless Saint roared with laughter and said, "Even if you reached a power of 10 stars at the mountain river tier, do you think you can still maintain a battle prowess of 10 stars once you advance to the sun-moon tier? Then, according to what you've said, if you cultivate to the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier, wouldn't you be able to reach a power of 11 stars or 12 stars? This was also Ling Han understood a little, and he said, in other words, after advancing to the sun-moon tier, the power of those at a higher cultivation level will drop? It can't be considered a drop, Notionless Saint explained. After all, the sun-moon tier is far more powerful than the mountain river tier. Your power of 10 stars is only comparable to the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. Thus, after advancing to this cultivation level, your power of 10 stars will only be able to surpass 6 stars. For example, if you reached a power of 20 stars at the Shattering Void tier, but after advancing to the Mountain River tier, will you be able to surpass 9 stars of power by 10 stars? Ling Han understood. The main reason was because the gap between each major tier of the immortal level was far too large, causing the ability to surpass one's cultivation level to drop drastically after advancing to the next major tier. If a power of 10 stars would drop to 6 stars, then a power of 6 stars would most likely drop to 2 or 3 stars. No wonder even 5-star geniuses were rare. This actually made a lot of sense. Chapter 1164. Yang Hao suppressed Ling Han in all aspects. Even with the protection of the Vajra seal, Ling Han was still riddled with wounds. If it weren't for the fact that he had the indestructible Heaven Scroll to heal his wounds, he definitely wouldn't be standing at this moment. This caused the spectators to exclaim in shock and admiration. Not only were his defenses and recovery abilities astonishing, but his willpower was even more frightening. Facing an elite like Yang Hao, even if he lost to someone of the same cultivation level, there was no need to take it to heart. Moreover, the gap between their cultivation levels was too large, so it was normal for him to lose. Why did he continue to persevere? Moreover, Ling Han wasn't just taking a beating. He had also wounded Yang Hao. Although it was only a small wound, it was still an astonishing achievement to be able to wound Yang Hao. In the majestic heaven sect, who below the heavenly body tier could do this? Although Ling Han had lost this battle, it was still a glorious defeat. This was already enough. How much longer can you persevere? Yang Hao smirked coldly. In fact, he could inflict more damage on Ling Han, but he had purposely held back. This wasn't because he was merciful, but rather because he wanted to torture Ling Han for a longer period of time. His status as a king tier was actually being doubted. This was unforgivable. Ling Han wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his fighting spirit soaring. In fact, he wasn't just taking a beating. Battling such a terrifying opponent allowed him to gain a deeper understanding of the lightning sword technique. He wanted to continue fighting, but the problem was that the Lion Seal and Vajra Seal were about to be worn out. The 2 divine seals could be used 10 times at most, but that wasn't absolute. There was also a time limit. Thus, although Ling Han had only used the Lion Seal once, this battle had been too long, and this divine seal was about to be used up. The Vajra seal could still last a little longer, but definitely not for too long. What should he do? Did he have to hide in the Black Tower? However, that would expose the secret of the Black Tower. This was a spatial god tool, and it was invisible at that. Perhaps even Venerable Trinity would be tempted. Enough, a cold voice said. Yang Hao turned around to look. It was a young girl. She looked slightly naive, but her cultivation level was only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. Did she have the right to order him around? He ignored her, and another palm struck at Ling Han. Bam! A ray of light streaked past, and the young girl appeared in front of Ling Han in an incomparably strange manner. She raised her hand lightly and received his palm strike. Yang Hao was shocked. He didn't know how the girl appeared in front of Ling Han. Something's wrong. This young girl's aura was extremely unstable. She was clearly in the mountain river tier, yet there was a kind of pressure that caused even his heart to palpitate. In fact, he was even terrified. This was a crushing defeat at the level of martial art. How is that possible? He was in the Sun Moon tier, and if one wanted to crush him in terms of martial art, one would have to be in the heavenly body tier. But this young girl was in the heavenly body tier. What kind of joke was this? I don't believe it. Yang Hao made a move again, pressing towards the young girl. We've already said that's enough. Are you looking to die? The woman's gaze grew cold as she also slapped him. Pa! Yang Hao was instantly sent flying, and a mist of blood sprayed from his body. Then, he landed on the ground and lay there motionless. He must have fainted. The faces of everyone present twitched. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. That young girl was naturally a seed this time. She had just entered the sect, so she didn't stand out in the slightest. But now? She had sent Yang Hao flying with a single slap. What kind of terrifying power was this? What the hell? Previously, Ling Han had appeared out of nowhere and defeated Wuxia, one of the 6 kings. Moreover, he could just barely exchange blows with Yang Hao. This was already incredibly astonishing. But now, an even more ferocious person had appeared and directly defeated Yang Hao with a single strike. Were the new disciples of this batch going to defy the heavens? Who is she? She's too powerful. I think she's called Hu Feiyun. She's from the Joint Peace Planet and the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. That's right. She's the 9th king of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. Gasp! Isn't she at the Mountain River tier? How can a Mountain River tier cultivator be so powerful? Han Lin was also at the Mountain River tier just then, but wasn't he also ridiculously powerful? It's not the same, right? Everyone was dumbfounded. They could accept Ling Han's power. After all, he had used his divine seal, and his power was still inferior to Yang Hao's. However, Hu Feiyun's power was definitely not at the Sun Moon tier. She had advanced to the heavenly body tier. This was unacceptable. Even if a Mountain River tier cultivator ate a celestial pill, they couldn't be so powerful. Only Ling Han knew that this wasn't Hu Feiyun at all. Instead, it was Empress Luanxing's soul that had taken over his body. As expected, this empress still cared about him. When he was being beaten, she decisively came out to protect her husband. TSK, tough talk but soft heart. I like it. Yang Hao woke up, and he looked at Hu Feiyun in disbelief. She had only struck casually, and he had been defeated without being able to retaliate. What kind of difference in power was this? He should have been invincible among those at the same cultivation level, but now a Mountain River tier cultivator could just barely exchange blows with him. The other was even more powerful, and had defeated him with a single strike. This made him feel as if his outlook on life had been twisted. How could this have happened? Are you having fun beating me? Hu Feiyun asked coldly. Right now, it was the domineering Empress Luanxing who was controlling this body. As she spoke, she launched a palm strike at Yang Hao. Pung! Yang Hao was sent flying, and a mist of blood sprayed from his body again. In fact, a large amount of life essence was flowing out of his body. This injury was quite severe, and it was even threatening to shake his foundation. Hey, it's about time to stop. A middle-aged man appeared. There were 2 large stars hovering behind him, and he stood in front of Yang Hao to protect him. Previously, although Yang Hao had been at a slight disadvantage, he had still been able to dampen his spirit. Now, however, Yang Hao had been beaten to the point where his life essence was flowing out of his body. This wouldn't do. The sect still cared about Yang Hao, and they had high hopes for him. You dare to stop me? Empress Luanxing said coldly, a boundless domineering aura radiating from her. The middle-aged man was all smiles, and he said, you must be Empress Luanxing, right? You've left a spiritual mark on this person's body, and you can project a portion of your power. However, it's only a spiritual mark, and I don't want to erase it. Let's stop here. Who would have guessed that Empress Luanxing was from the 9 snake tribe? Who would have guessed that she could extract her 9 souls and form 9 doppelgangers? This wasn't as simple as leaving a spiritual mark. Not only could the 9 doppelgangers grow like ordinary cultivators, but they could also contain the consciousness of Empress Luanxing's main body and endlessly increase their battle prowess. Empress Luanxing smiled sinisterly and said, "Then come and give it a try." Just how domineering was a ruler. She didn't give him any chance to refuse and directly attacked. Her slender hand shot out, and the power of the heavenly body tier burst forth. The sky collapsed and stars fell. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. The middle-aged man paled in shock. How could she be so powerful? He didn't have time to ponder this question, and he hurriedly moved to block. Pung! He was sent flying with a single strike. Everyone was dumbfounded. Fuck! She's so powerful that she has no friends. Chapter 1165. This heavenly body tier middle-aged man was called Wei Zecheng. He was an elite at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, and was very famous in the sect. Even in the majestic heaven sect, there were only 24 heavenly body tier elites. Such an elite was actually sent flying with a single slap? Who could believe it? And the person who had done this was actually a measly mountain river tier disciple? This was too shocking. No matter how powerful and prodigious Yang Hao was, he was only at the sun-moon tier. How could he compare to a heavenly body tier elite? However, even Yang Hao being defeated in a single move was shocking enough, and now Wei Zicheng was also defeated in a single move. This naturally made people feel like their souls were about to leave their bodies. They were completely unable to believe it. Wei Zicheng gritted his teeth as he crawled to his feet, his expression filled with shock. He had thought that Hu Feiyun only possessed a spiritual mark of Empress Luanxing, and could at most unleash a sliver of the power of the heavenly body tier. But now it was more than just a sliver. If a sliver of power could be so powerful, this empress had definitely cultivated to the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. I have to admit that you are astonishingly powerful, but this is the majestic heaven sect, Wei Zicheng said, suppressing his anger. Empress Luanxing was completely disdainful of him. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back and said, "Keep that dog in check. If he bites people again, I will pull out all his teeth." Yang Hao couldn't help but feel humiliated. He had actually been called a dog. However, did he dare to jump up and boast now? That was Empress Luanxing. Who didn't know that those who could become the ruler of an empire were all talented and bold, and who wasn't a genius in martial art? Who wasn't standing at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier? Yang Hao was indeed astonishingly talented, but to surpass Empress Luanxing, who knew how many tens of thousands of years later? Perhaps it would never happen. Just think about it. How many eternal river tiers were there in such a large galaxy? 1. Yang Hao could only swallow this humiliation. He glared at Ling Han hatefully. It was precisely because of this person that he had been humiliated in public. Although losing to a supreme elite of the heavenly body tier wouldn't cast too much of a shadow over his reputation, such a crushing defeat had still been witnessed by others. No matter what, this wasn't something to be proud of. Ling Han cracked a smile at him. This was his wife, and he had no qualms about standing up for her. Who told you to use your realm to suppress me? In a battle of the same level, who's afraid of who? A flash of anger also flashed across Wei Zicheng's face. However, in front of Empress Luanxing's domineering aura, his aura weakened, and the vicious words that were already at the tip of his tongue actually didn't come out. This was the difference between an expert and a king. Remember my words. Empress Luanxing glanced at Yang Hao again. Then she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her terrifying aura had already receded like the tide. There was no longer any hint of domineering aura. Instead, she exuded a sense of confusion. It naturally became Hu Feiyun. Why are you guys staring at me like that? Muddled Egg asked, a strange expression on her face. Everyone couldn't help but suck their teeth. Who would have thought that this unremarkable woman would have such a strong foundation? This unremarkable didn't mean that Hu Feiyun wasn't beautiful enough. Rather, her performance after entering the sect was mediocre. and there wasn't anything special about her. Among all the geniuses, he was naturally unremarkable. However, this unremarkable woman actually had the soul mark of a supreme elite hidden in her body. This was truly frightening. Thankfully, he hadn't quarreled with her previously. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know how he died. Although Empress Luanxing had left, Wei Ziqing didn't dare to do anything to Hu Feiyun. He glanced at Hu Feiyun again, then grabbed Yang Hao and fluttered down the peak. After being struck twice by Empress Luanxing, though it didn't take his life, Yang Hao was still severely injured. His injuries were definitely 10 or 20 times more serious than Ling Han's. This was the Empress' attitude. If you hit one of my people, I'll return the favor tenfold. How domineering, Ling Han thought. No wonder she wants me to reach the Genesis tier before I can marry her. Otherwise, with her domineering style, she would definitely ride on top of me. Speaking of which, it's not that I can't accept this position. After such a commotion, everyone didn't have any thoughts of continuing, and all bid their farewells. Moreover, after seeing the battles of the king tiers, they were also filled with ambition for the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. Otherwise, even if they broke through to the sun moon tier, so what? In a battle of equals, they were destined to lose. For prodigies like them, they were naturally aiming for the position of king tier that could sweep away all others at the same cultivation level. Brother Han, I'll contact you in a few days, He Tao said with a smile. He then waved his hand and swaggered off. Ling Han nodded and said, then we'll contact each other in the future. Senior Brother Han, do you know a person called Ling Han? Xiao Sisi and the others all walked over staring at Ling Han. This person also possessed a terrifying physique. If there were two such freaks in the world, they wouldn't believe it. Moreover, this person was called Han Lin. So wasn't that Ling Han? Ling Han knew that they already had a clue, so he didn't want to hide it anymore. He trusted that they wouldn't blabber about it, so he smiled and said, everyone, it's been more than 2 years. Are you all in good spirits? Xiao Sisi and the others were all moved. Fuck, it really was this guy. I guessed it could be you, but I didn't dare to believe it. After all, you were only in the high extreme 2 years ago, Su Jing said with a sigh. It's only been such a long time, and you've already surpassed us in cultivation level. It's simply unbelievable. It's just luck, Ling Han said. Fuck, he's still pretending. I'm really not used to it. Let's go drink, we have to get him drunk. That's right, we have to get him drunk. They pulled Ling Han up, and the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping naturally followed them. Everyone went to drink. To Ling Han's surprise, Xiao Wuk actually followed them. He sighed with emotion. In the past, they had been enemies. He hadn't thought that this guy's attitude would have such a huge change. There was a small town below the majestic heaven sect, and it had all kinds of restaurants. They asked for a private room, and then began to drink to their heart's content. Speaking of that mystery realm, many people here actually knew about it. You're talking about the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, right? Xiao Sisi nodded and said, that's an ancient mystery realm, and it's an outer restriction that Venerable Trinity personally broke. Otherwise, no one would be able to enter. However, even Venerable Trinity couldn't enter. It's said that he either died, or the mystery realm was destroyed by him. There are many rare treasures from the ancient era inside, as well as some high-level godly medicines. It's very attractive. Because only cultivators at the mountain river tier can enter, many people deliberately suppress their cultivation level, so that they can enter the mystery realm a few more times and accumulate strength for their future cultivation. Su Jing and the others also chimed in. They all had powerful backgrounds, and they were far more knowledgeable about some secrets than Ling Han. However, I've heard that some large clans are even more ridiculous. They purposely have some Sun Moon tier elites suppress their cultivation level to escort their juniors into the mystery realm. I've also heard that, Xiao Wuk said. Xiao Wuk said, moreover, although I've severed my cultivation level, I can still increase my power by ingesting some forbidden alchemical pills. Moreover, my comprehension of regulations has already reached the Sun Moon tier long ago. Thus, once my power increases, I can naturally use high-level regulations. That's equivalent to the Sun Moon tier. Chapter 1166. Ling Han was slightly surprised. They actually went to such lengths for a mystery realm. It was clear that this mystery realm was quite extraordinary, which was why the various great forces had made so many preparations. Then come, when the mystery realm opens, I'll follow you guys, he said with a smile. Which of these people wasn't the heir of a great clan? And they were very familiar with this Yellow Spring mystery realm. Ling Han didn't believe that the forces behind them wouldn't operate on this mystery realm. Perhaps when they entered, they would be accompanied by such people. He, Xiao Sisi and the others all laughed. As the saying went, there was no need to resort to insinuations. They knew those secrets clearly, and that was because they did the same. Brother Ling, if you can join our Thousand Frost Majestic Empire, you can state any condition, Xiao Sisi said, her bright eyes twinkling, exuding a hint of charm. Such words coupled with such a look, she was just short of saying that becoming a vassal of the current empire was completely negotiable. Brother Ling, I have a younger sister who is praised as a heavenly beauty, devastatingly beautiful, a perfect match for Brother Ling, Duan said hurriedly. I can guarantee that Brother Ling can be conferred the title of king. Join the tyrannical Summer Majestic Empire, and we'll be blood brothers, Xia Yuanke said. Ling Han had already proven his talent, and was worth this price. Although Ling Han had offended Yang Hao was only at the Sun Moon tier, and his background wasn't stronger than theirs. It could be said that as long as Yang Hao didn't step into the Eternal River tier, what need was there for them to be afraid of? Putting aside whether Yang Hao could step into the Eternal River tier, even if he could, how many years would it take? Even though Yang Hao had only used less than 1,000 years to reach the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier, the Heavenly Body tier was already an extremely large threshold, let alone the Eternal River tier. There was only a single Eternal River tier elite in this galaxy, so it was easy to imagine how difficult it was. Thus, his advantage of being a few hundred years ahead of Ling Han in cultivation time would soon disappear. In the future, one step would easily take tens of thousands of years, and a few hundred years was really nothing. Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed along with them. He had his own force, so how could he join another nation? Moreover, even if he wanted to join a majestic empire, it would be the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Even the Empress is one of his people. Of course, these words were only spoken in his mind. Otherwise, it was entirely possible that the Eternity Sky Emperor, Jade Drop Emperor, and even a few of the 7 great generals would come to the majestic heaven sect to hunt him down. After the banquet ended, Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, Feng Peyun, Mu Rongqing, and Helian Tianyun gathered together, and once again began to drink. Now that Ling Han had arrived, they could naturally cultivate under the reincarnation tree. Meanwhile, Ling Han took a break from his busy schedule, and brought Shui Yinyu far away. They sat down in a patch of flowers at the side. Wife, our son is so lucky. Ling Han placed his hands on the big vixen's perky breasts, his face full of praise. In contrast, Ling Jianxue was really pitiful. Helian Sun Xue was really lucky that her son did not starve to death. Though Shui Yinyu already had the most intimate relationship with him, she was still very shy. She couldn't help but blush, and she turned her head to bite his wrist. She scolded, "Little rascal." Her beautiful eyes moved, and there was boundless affection in them. Ling Han's heart swayed and he said, "Thankfully, I'm a thick-skinned person. Otherwise, how could such a beautiful teacher become the mother of my child?" Shui Yinyu struggled lightly and said in annoyance, "When you said this, if you weren't so lecherously groping me, I might have been moved. But now I just want to bite you to death, you damn rascal." "Are you a dog? You really want to bite?" Ling Han said with a smile. His eyes turned and he said, "Since you like biting so much, let me tell you a new way to play, so that you can bite to your heart's content." He leaned close to Shui Yinyu's ear and whispered softly, causing Shui Yinyu's eyes to instantly widen. She couldn't help but jump up, and instantly straddled Ling Han's body. Damn rascal, shameless and vulgar." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "So wife, you like to take the initiative. Come, your husband will let you do whatever you want today." Shui Yinyu pinched him fiercely. Why did this guy always have to tease her until she was beyond embarrassed? "Gasp, I say, wife, where are you pinching?" Ling Han deliberately bared his teeth and sucked in a breath of cold air. Shui Yinyu was startled. and only then did she realize that she had actually pinched Ling Han's protruding part in her embarrassment. She was instantly too embarrassed to show her face, and how would she dare to touch Ling Han again? Wife, I like this side of you. You're obviously very flirtatious, yet your skin is extremely thin, Ling Han said with a smile. Pervert. After battling Wuxia and Yang Hao, Ling Han naturally became a celebrity in the Majestic Heaven sect. Although Hu Feiyun's performance was more eye-catching, everyone knew that she could send heavenly body-tier elites flying with a single slap because she had the mark of an elite on her body, and she was actually not very impressive herself. The next morning there was an endless stream of people coming to visit Ling Han, wanting to befriend him and forge a relationship with him. Ling Han didn't put on airs, however. Instead, he chatted and joked with everyone and formed a good relationship with them, because in his eyes these people were all potential customers. Those who could enter the Majestic Heaven sect were basically the heirs of major forces, and the only thing they definitely didn't lack was money. If he wanted to earn money, he naturally had to walk the path of alchemy, and the people he sold were precisely these people. Ling Han chuckled, and his attitude was practically amiable, causing these people to feel extremely flattered. They hadn't thought that Ling Han would be so unpretentious. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu shook her head at one side. She could be said to be very familiar with Ling Han, and naturally knew what he was planning. She thought to herself, these people have all been treated as fat sheep by Ling Han, yet they're still grateful to Ling Han. As expected, they've been sold by him, yet they're still counting the money for him. She then thought of herself. Hadn't she also been willingly tricked by this guy? This sweetheart? She was both shy and sweet. Is this senior brother Han? A young man in a green robe walked in. His eyes first swept over Shui Yinyu, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face. After a few more glances, he looked at Ling Han. Ling Han was already displeased with him, so he calmly said, I am Han Lin. The young man in the green robe smiled proudly, and said, I am Gai Yongxi from the Gao faction. What do you mean by good faction or bad faction? Ling Han hated it the most when people put on airs in front of him. That guy's arrogance annoyed him just looking at it. Gai Yongxi was unconcerned and said, Senior brother Han, you still don't know, right? Our Majestic Heaven sect is divided into many factions. The founder took in a total of 9 personal disciples, so the factions of these 9 personal disciples are the strongest. Our Gao faction is one of them. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Venerable Trinity had no intention of contending for supremacy, but his 9 disciples were unwilling to stay put. Otherwise, they wouldn't have formed a faction. When Venerable Trinity passed into Tao, this galaxy would definitely experience chaos, and the territory would be redrawn. He calmly asked, so what? A sliver of anger appeared on Gai Yongxi's face. He hadn't heard him say that he was from the Gao faction, and that it was founded by Venerable Trinity's personal disciple. However, when he thought of his mission, he forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, I've come under the young master's orders to invite senior brother Han to join our Gao faction. Chapter 1168. Ling Han hesitated for a moment, but when he thought of the Mo family's help, he nodded and said, Indeed, I want to refine pills myself. The old man was surprised, but the smile on his face grew wider. He said, Young Master Han, I want to do business with you. Oh, what a coincidence, my surname is also Han, and my first name is Hua. So it's Shopkeeper Han. Ling Han greeted and said, May I know what kind of business Shopkeeper Han wants to do with me? Han Hua said, I can give you a few pill recipes for free, and I hope that you can hand them over to our business to sell after you refine them. Ling Han was stunned at first, but then a trace of admiration for Han Hua rose in his heart. As expected of a businessman. Although the other party was very generous and said that he would give him a few pill formulas, it was true that pill formulas were a type of resource. However, such resources could also be said to be worthless. That was because he only needed to make a copy, and there would be no loss for the Mahist establishment. However, if they could get pills from Ling Han and sell them, even if they didn't make a profit, they would still bring in a lot of customers. For a cultivator, pills were indispensable. And if you bought pills, you might even buy something else. As long as you bought one more thing, the store would make a profit. Besides, it was just a few pill recipes and they could make friends with a super genius like Ling Han. There was no downside for the Mo family business. No wonder the Mo family could open their businesses all over the galaxy. They had a thorough understanding of how to do business, and had made friends with them everywhere. However, Han Hua would never have thought of how important it was to make friends with Ling Han, and how much help it would bring to the business. This was the Alchemy Emperor. Ling Han laughed and said, "All right, then I'll thank you in advance, shopkeeper Han." Han Hua, on the other hand, was overjoyed. He didn't think as much as Ling Han. He just wanted to make friends with Ling Han. After all, it didn't cost him anything, and he could make friends with a young king like Ling Han. As for Ling Han saying that he wanted to concoct pills, he didn't really take it to heart. After all, how could there be such a genius who could achieve such terrifying achievements in martial art, and also advance by leaps and bounds in alchemy Dao? As for selling medicine for Ling Han, that was naturally to flatter Ling Han. "May I know which pill formula young Master Han wants?" Han Hua asked. "Level 5. Ling Han replied. He already knew how to concoct level 4 god pills. His next target was naturally level 5. Han Hua was astonished. Rank 5. If you want to play around, level 1 divine pills are enough. What's the point of playing around with level 5 divine pills? Even if you're a seed of the majestic heaven sect and have obtained a lot of resources, you still can't afford to squander alchemical pills, especially high-grade alchemical pills." Ling Han revealed a smile as he withdrew a few bottles of medicinal pills and handed them over, saying, "These are the profound azure pills and jade heaven pills that I refined. I'll have to trouble manager Han to sell them for me." Han Hua received the bottle in a daze. It took him a moment to realize that Ling Han wasn't joking. Profound azure pill, level 4 divine pill. Could it be that Ling Han really is an alchemist? And a high-grade one at that? He didn't dare to be careless, and hurriedly opened the bottle to inspect it carefully. The Mo clan establishment sold everything, so Han Hua was naturally very familiar with alchemical pills. He could immediately confirm that these 2 pills were genuine, just as Ling Han had said. They really were refined by Ling Han. Han Hua believed it. In any case, he was deliberately trying to befriend Ling Han. He nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment, young Master Han. I'll go retrieve the pill formula. Because it's a bit precious, I don't carry it around with me. I'm afraid I'll lose it. Manager Han, please feel free." After a while, Han Hua returned, and handed over a small booklet. Ling Han took one, and the words 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill were written on the cover. He flipped through it roughly, and found that it was all about the ingredients and concoction process of the 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill. In particular, the concoction process took up more than 90% of the space. The refining process of a high-grade divine pill was extremely complicated, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it would take up an entire booklet to describe it. 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill can temporarily raise the battle prowess of those who cultivate fire-type cultivation techniques by 2 stars. 2 stars. Ling Han couldn't help but be astonished when he read the introduction of the pill formula. One had to realize that most people were mediocre, and it was difficult for them to even raise their battle prowess by 1 star, to say nothing of 2 stars. Although this wouldn't be of much help to his cultivation, he didn't need a level 5 divine pill for the time being. However, if he managed to refine this pill, it would definitely be treated as a treasure by fire-type cultivators. Moreover, elites at the Sun-Moon tier definitely wouldn't lack money, and they would definitely be able to afford a high price. "Young Master Han, what do you think of this pill formula?" Han Hua asked. "All right." Ling Han nodded. "However, young Master Han, this 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill is extremely difficult to refine. I've heard that even many level 6 alchemists can't refine it," Han Hua reminded. "If you really can't refine it, please don't spend too much time on it. After all, young Master Han is a genius of martial art." "I know what I'm doing," Ling Han replied. Han Hua had good intentions, so he naturally wouldn't be angered. Moreover, Han Hua's words were indeed reasonable. In the end, martial art should still be the most important. However, Han Hua didn't know that Ling Han had a reincarnation tree. This was practically nature-defying. The 2 of them discussed the details of their collaboration. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that Ling Han could refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. Han Hui didn't have too much confidence in him, so he gave a large share of the profits. In terms of profits, Ling Han would get 10%, and the Mo clan establishment would get 10%. He had originally planned to give all of the profits to Ling Han. However, it was Ling Han who took the initiative to compromise that he finally accepted the current distribution plan. Han Hui really didn't believe that Ling Han could succeed. Thus, he naturally didn't mind giving away all of the profits. After all, this was practically nothing. Right now, Ling Han needed a large amount of true origin stones to purchase godly metal to improve the quality of his divine demon sword. Thus, he bought the ingredients needed to refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill in the shop, before returning to the majestic heaven sect. He immediately entered the Black Tower, and comprehended the pill recipe under the reincarnation tree. The steps of alchemy were actually very easy to grasp. Even an ordinary person could do this. No matter how complicated it was only a matter of time. Familiarity made perfect. However, not just anyone could make the divine patterns in the ingredients intertwine. One needed a powerful divine sense and fine control. The changes involved in this process numbered in the millions. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to understand it even if they spent their entire life trying. Even level 5 and level 6 godly alchemists would need over 100 years to master it. Thus, Han Hui truly didn't believe that Ling Han could refine the alchemical pill in a short period of time. However, Ling Han was brimming with confidence. He had the reincarnation tree. As the tree's leaves swayed gently, he entered into a meditative state. He simulated the refinement of the alchemical pill in his spiritual world over and over again. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time passed by quietly. Chapter 1169. 1 day outside is equivalent to 1 year under the reincarnation tree. 7 days later, Ling Han attempted to refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill for the first time. Naturally, he failed. There was still a considerable gap between imagination and reality. Ling Han did not continue to cultivate. Instead, he chose to meditate for 2 days. In other words, he used 2 years to relive the process of failure, and then began the second refinement. Another failure. But this time, Ling Han only summed up his failure for half a day before starting his third attempt. It worked. However, he only obtained 2 pills. In theory, a cauldron of 7 ultimate flying flame pills could only produce 4 pills at most. Ling Han had successfully refined 2 pills on his first try. His success rate was 50%, which was not easy at all. However, Ling Han wasn't very satisfied with these 2 pills. Because the quality wasn't very high. Ling Han had an urge to toss these 2 pills away. The Alchemy Emperor had personally made a move, so how could he allow these pills to be seen by others? However, he had only just raised his hand when he put it down again. Poor. These 2 pills could be sold for several tens of thousands of true essence stones. It would be a pity to lose them like this. Sigh, why am I so poor? Ling Han stroked his chin, and then looked at the divine demon sword. He thought about how much money he would have to spend to truly upgrade this divine sword to the level of divine metal. But it is worth it to obtain a divine weapon that truly belongs to me. For example, the Black Tower was awesome, but he could only use it as a spatial god tool, and its powerful offensive capabilities could not be displayed at all. Therefore, it wasn't about how high the grade of a treasure was, but how much power it could display. Again, Ling Han bought a total of 5 sets of materials. It wasn't that he didn't want to buy more, but he was short of money, so he could only do this. On the 4th try, he managed to refine 3 7 ultimate flying flame pills. On the 5th try, he managed to refine a perfect 4 pills. No, he improved rapidly. However, after every refinement, he would summarize and reflect on his mistakes under the reincarnation tree, erasing any flaws. Because of this, the 5th cauldron's medicinal dawn improved greatly in terms of quality and reached perfection. I wonder if shopkeeper Han will be stunned when he arrives. Ling Han smiled. It had only been a month, but he had already refined 9 flying flame pills, and 4 of them had even reached a perfect level. Successfully refining a cauldron of 7 ultimate flying flame pills would take 5 days, and this was only for level 5 divine pills. It was said that from level 9 onwards, Refining a cauldron of pills would easily take a year and a half. Just the slightest mistake would cause all of his previous efforts to go to waste. My cultivation hasn't increased by much, but my soul has become much stronger, Ling Han mumbled. He had been concocting pills all this time, so naturally he had no time to cultivate. His origin power was practically stagnant, but concocting pills was extremely taxing on one's primordial spirit. This was a form of tempering. I'll sell the alchemical pills first. I have to earn enough money to upgrade the divine demon sword to level 4. This was Ling Han's temporary goal. Advancing to the 5th level could wait. After all, he hadn't broken through to the Sun Moon tier yet. Ling Han exited the Black Tower and heard from Fan Ru that the people from the Gao faction had already come a few times. However, because Ling Han had been in seclusion this entire time, they naturally could only leave in displeasure. Apparently, Gao Huang was already furious and said that he wanted Ling Han to personally go to the Gao faction to seek an audience. Moreover, the deadline was yesterday, which was already the last day. Idiot! Ling Han shook his head. He couldn't be bothered with them at all and left. Ling Han arrived at the small town at the foot of the mountain and directly went to the Mo clan establishment. Young Master Han. Han Hua just so happened to be on the ground floor. When he saw Ling Han, he was first startled, and then wore a strange expression. Why had this prodigy come again? Could it be that after studying pill recipes, he realized that he couldn't successfully refine them, so he gave up? Now, he wanted to change to an easier pill recipe to refine? In his eyes, this was very reasonable. Ling Han retrieved a pill bottle and said, "Shopkeeper Han, please help me sell these alchemical pills." Han Hua didn't think much of it. After receiving the pill bottle, he said, "Young Master Han, is this the mysterious azure pill again?" "That's right, the alchemical pills that young Master Han asked me to sell last time have all been sold, and we made a considerable profit." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "This isn't the mysterious azure pill, but the 7 ultimate flying flame pill." "Pooh!" Han Hua immediately spluttered, and then coughed incessantly. His face was completely red. "Are you joking? It's only been a month, and you've already refined the 7 ultimate flying flame pill? Impossible! Impossible!" Although this was a level 5 divine pill, it was extremely difficult to refine. Even many level 6 alchemists would deliberately avoid it. However, Ling Han had refined it in a mere month. Wasn't this a joke? "Young Master Han, you really know how to joke," he said with a smile. Ling Han also smiled and said, "I do indeed like to joke." Only then did Han Hua breathe a sigh of relief. He curiously asked, "Then what alchemical pill did young Master Han refine this time?" He was curious. Didn't Ling Han take the 7 ultimate flying flame pill to study? Why has he gone to refine another alchemical pill? He pulled out the stopper and poured out a few crimson alchemical pills. Shockingly, these alchemical pills seemed to be burning. Not only were they exuding heat, but they could also feel the surging flames. If an ordinary person held these alchemical pills with their hand, a hole would probably be instantly burned into their palm. This was because the temperature was astonishingly high. Perhaps even flower blossom tier cultivators wouldn't dare to touch them easily. However, Han Hua was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so this was naturally a piece of cake. However, the expression on his face was even more astonished than if a hole had been burned into his palm. How could he not be astonished? "This is fucking 7 ultimate flying flame pill. Young Master Han, are you sure you're not joking with me?" Han Hua's face twitched. He was about to faint. Ling Han laughed heartily. He patted Han Hua's shoulder and said, "Shopkeeper Han, you have to improve your sense of humor." Although the two of them were tens of thousands of years apart in age, Ling Han's cultivation level was superior to Han Hua's. Thus, according to the rules of the martial art world, he was actually the senior. Patting Han Hua's shoulder was definitely not a form of humiliation. Han Hua looked closely. He was an expert when it came to appraising goods, and he could immediately determine that these 9 alchemical pills had all been recently refined. The 7 ultimate flying flame pill was even more distinctive. The fresher it was, the greener the flame would be. It would slowly turn blue, then red and finally purplish black. If it had truly turned purplish-black, it meant that too much time had passed, and most of its medicinal effects had already dissipated. It was basically a useless pill. Han Hua was on the verge of tears. These are really 7 ultimate flying flame pills that have just been refined? Could it be that Ling Han has truly succeeded? What kind of freak is he? Young Master Han, you've really refined them? No, what you're feeling right now is just an illusion, Ling Han said with a smile. This time Han Hua finally had a sense of humor. He said, Young Master Han, you almost scared this old man to death. Refining the 7 ultimate flying flame pill in just a month is simply unprecedented and unparalleled. Although he was purposely flattering Ling Han, he did not exaggerate too much. Without the reincarnation tree, even Ling Han would have to spend more than 10 years to fully understand this pill recipe. After advancing to the divine realm, a cultivator's lifespan would increase by leaps and bounds. However, comprehending a certain secret art, formation, or pill recipe would still require hundreds of years. It was extremely shocking. Chapter 1170. Ling Han laughed and then said with a serious expression, Shopkeeper Han, I need you to help me with something, and that is to collect as much level 3 godly metal as possible. I'll pay you with my profits. No problem. Han Hua cleverly didn't ask why Ling Han needed so much godly metal. Instead, he patted his chest and agreed. Sorry to trouble you, Shopkeeper Han. I'm willing to be at your service, young Master Han. Ling Han nodded and bought a few more batches of ingredients. He still had to continue refining the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. This was his source of income. Han Hua accompanied Ling Han in selecting ingredients as he wiped away his sweat. He still hadn't recovered from his shock. Ling Han smiled and said, Shopkeeper Han, are you regretting our previous agreement? You get 10% while I get 90%. You've suffered a great loss. No way. Han Hua hurriedly shook his head. Although he was also very pained, as an outstanding merchant, he knew that Ling Han could have completely not handed over the 7 ultimate flying flame pill to them to sell. Would there be any fear that no one would buy such an alchemical pill? With a casual shout, they would be able to sell as many as they had. Moreover, the other party could have taken all the profits, yet he had specially given 10% to the Mo clan establishment. This was a huge favor. He naturally knew that Ling Han had no understanding of his own alchemy level. How many people could do this when he clearly knew that he could refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill, and still give up 10% of the profits? I can't thank young Master Han enough for your good intentions. He also didn't understand why Ling Han would take such good care of the Mo clan establishment. Ling Han nodded and said, On the way to the majestic heaven sect, I was ambushed and lost my way in the galaxy. Fortunately, I came across the Mo clan's merchant ship, and they didn't abandon me, allowing me to hitch a ride. Only now did Han Hua understand. He involuntarily clasped his hands and said, Young Master Han is truly a man of character. To the Mo clan, this was only an insignificant gesture, yet they had obtained the friendship of a young King Tier in exchange. This transaction was really too worth it. Moreover, this was also because Ling Han knew how to repay kindness. Otherwise, so what if he turned his back on him? Ling Han smiled and said, Shopkeeper Han, please proceed with the matter that I've requested of you as soon as possible. There is no need to care what kind of level 3 godly metal it is. It doesn't matter even if it's old or impure. It's fine as long as its quality reaches level 3. This old man will remember it. Young Master Han, please come back in a month's time. This old man will definitely give young Master Han a surprise, Han Hua said confidently. He decided to report Ling Han's matter to the higher-ups of the Mo clan. In the first place, a young King Tier was worth roping in, let alone a man like Ling Han who valued comradeship. He would report to the higher-ups of the Mo clan and obtain an unlimited amount of godly metal for Ling Han. A mere level 3 godly metal could be exchanged for a favorable impression from a young King Tier. This was really too worth it. Moreover, Ling Han's achievements in alchemy were really too frightening. He had refined level 5 divine pills in a single month, and not just once. Gasp, I actually forgot. Young Master Han is only at the Mountain River tier. How is he able to refine a level 5 divine pill? Can one be considered to be in the Sun Moon tier just because he has formed the 5th mountain river? A dual cultivator of pill and martial arts. A master of both pill and martial arts. Our Mo family definitely cannot miss out on such a genius. Perhaps in the future this youth will rule the world. We must be bound to him at all costs. Han Hua murmured. Although his surname was not Mo, he was still a member of the Mo family. Because he had married into the Mo family, his sons and grandsons all had the surname Mo. Ling Han walked casually. Now that he had obtained the godly medal, he was in a very good mood. Next, he should prepare for the matter of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, and after this trip to the Mystery Realm, he would more or less be able to break through to the Sun Moon tier. Once he broke through to the Sun Moon tier, he would set out to search for the whereabouts of the 5 sects and the Rock Palace. He couldn't keep delaying. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, it had been 10,000 years since they last met. Who knew how she was doing now? When she saw him again, she would definitely be astonished. Not only had he revived the dead, but he had also advanced so quickly that it was practically unbelievable. Only 10,000 years had passed, and he had already reached the Sun Moon tier. This should have surpassed the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Sword Emperor. After being bullied by this evil woman for decades, it was time for him to fight back. How could he not give her a good spanking? His son should be all grown up now. What about his parents? Hunyo should be becoming more and more like a young lady. What about Helian Xuanshu as Yuxian heir, Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan? He sighed. Although not many years had passed in this life, the love debts he had incurred far surpassed the 200 years of his last life. On the way back to the majestic Heaven sect, Ling Han decided to bury all the love debts to the bottom of his heart. In comparison, nothing was more important than the desire to become stronger. Only with strength could he do what he wanted to do, even if it was just for the freedom to breathe air. Han Lin. A fierce roar traveled over from afar. He walked over and saw that there were currently 4 people standing at the entrance of his palace, all of them wearing expressions of fury. He recognized 2 of them. One was Fu Liangye, and the other was Gai Yongxi. Why had they come again? Han Lin, this is your last chance. Young Master Gao said that if you kneel all the way to Thousand Bird Peak today, he can forgive your previous disrespect, Gai Yongxi said proudly. Ling Han looked at him with a strange expression and said, Are you forgetful? You want to ask for a beating again? Han Lin, a middle-aged man, said. His voice was deep like thunder, exuding a frightening might the moment he opened his mouth. This was not because he was naturally domineering, but because he had used the power of suppression from his cultivation level. Sun Moon tier, no wonder Gai Yongxi was so bold today. It turned out that he had a powerful helper. Meanwhile, Fu Liangye smiled coldly. He had also joined the Gao faction, and when he learned that they were going to deal with Ling Han, he immediately took the initiative to ask to come along. He wanted to see how Ling Han would lower his head. It was fine if he didn't lower his head, but he would definitely be humiliated. Indeed, Sun Moon tier cultivators could not casually attack Mountain River tier cultivators. After all, not everyone was called Yang Hao, but if an elite of Sun Moon tier secretly played some tricks and suppressed Ling Han's cultivation level, and then had other Mountain River tier cultivators suppress Ling Han, who could say anything? Ling Han walked over, opened the door, entered and then closed the door. Who? Gai Yongxi and the others almost went mad with anger. What did you mean? Were they air? Were they being ignored just like that? Han Lin. Gai Yongxi pressed a hand on the door, stopping Ling Han from closing it. There was a taboo that definitely could not be violated in the majestic Heaven sect, and that was that without permission, one definitely could not enter another person's room. You could fight normally and it was fine. Cultivators improved their strength through battle. However, if they were disturbed during seclusion, it was very possible that they would be crippled. This was definitely not allowed by the sect. Thus, normally, as long as your cultivation level was similar, you could fight as you wanted and no one would stop you. However, when you returned to your residence, that was an absolute shelter, and no one could act recklessly. Even Yang Hao did not dare to break this kind of taboo. This was the bottom line. Thus, when Ling Han wanted to enter the room, Gai Yongxi naturally became anxious. Ling Han broke into a grin and stretched out a hand to grab Gai Yongxi. Obviously, you have forgotten my warning from last time and have come running in again. Chapter 1172. Thousand Source True Fluid. Notionless Saint thought for a moment and said, after the death of an eternal river tier immortal, after a long period of time, the murderous aura within the blood has been worn away, and if the essence has not been completely lost, it may become thousand source true fluid. For immortals below the eternal river tier, this is a precious treasure. Every drop of thousand source true fluid contains the comprehension of the great Tao of heaven and earth of an eternal river tier immortal, and can help immortals increase their cultivation level. It's quite good. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder Gao Huang was so desperate for thousand source true fluid. He had already cultivated to the peak stage of the sun-moon tier, but how difficult was it to cross the heavenly body tier? Even his father, who was also in the heavenly body tier, couldn't do it. After Gao Huang consumed 3 drops of thousand source true fluid, he might have a chance to break through to the heavenly body tier. Though Ling Han hadn't met this Gao Huang from his behavior, he was definitely a greedy person. Moreover, for something as important as breaking through to the heavenly body tier, the more thousand source true fluid the better. And Gao Huang actually said he only wanted 3 drops. What did this mean? The difficulty of obtaining thousand source true fluid was definitely astonishingly high, so even with Gao Huang's greed, he only wanted 3 drops. Sun-moon tier cultivators can't enter the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, so he searched everywhere for elites of the Mountain River tier to find thousand source true fluid for him. Ling Han shook his head and said, what an extremely selfish person. What right does he have to make others give him treasures? Ling Han couldn't be bothered to get angry, and began to concoct alchemical pills again. Before entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, he definitely had to improve the Divine Demon Sword to level 4, which would require large amounts of true origin stones. This time Ling Han didn't spend all his time on alchemical pills. He would take some time to cultivate and improve his origin power and body arts. Personal strength was the most important thing. However, after only half a month, Ling Han was forced to stop concocting alchemical pills. Yuan Chenghe was about to break through. However, he couldn't let Yuan Chenghe appear without reason and cross the heavenly tribulation in the sect. Thus, he left the sect alone, and then took out the cloud-piercing shuttle to a faraway place. He released Yuan Chenghe and let him cross the heavenly tribulation. Because his foundation was really solid, coupled with Yuan Chenghe's extraordinary talent, he naturally passed the heavenly tribulation easily, allowing another deity to be by Ling Han's side. There was also no problem for Qin Yi to pass the heavenly tribulation, but it was a bit difficult for Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu. It couldn't be helped. The natural talent of these 2 people was indeed a bit too ordinary. In the small world, they could just barely be considered geniuses, but normally speaking, the flower blossom tier should be the limit. But now they had been pushed to the shattering void tier by Ling Han, and could even possibly break through to the immortal level. This caused them to be somewhat unable to control their own power. He could only stop at the mountain river tier, right? Ling Han said inwardly. Qin Yi and Yuan Cheng he still had room to advance, but for Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu so be it. He returned to the majestic heaven sect, and continued to cultivate in seclusion. When the 1-month deadline was up, he brought the newly refined alchemical pills to the Mo clan establishment. So much godly metal. Ling Han was surprised. The spatial spirit tool that Han Hua handed over was filled with godly metal. Though he knew alchemical pills were very profitable, could they really earn this much? I reported young Master Han's matter to the clan, and the clan gave me an order, which is to complete this task for young Master Han with all my might, Han Hua said with a smile. I have been collecting godly metal this month. Additionally, the clan is also mobilizing, and will transport godly metal from other places. As long as young Master Han doesn't say it's enough, the godly metal will not stop. Ling Han smiled and said, aren't you afraid that I can't concoct enough alchemical pills to repay you? Haha, as long as young Master Han is happy, what's a mere bit of godly metal? Hanhua said proudly. It could be said that the Mo clan was the largest business in this galaxy. Though Hanhua's words were boastful, he did indeed have the confidence to back them up. Ling Han was astonished. The Mo clan actually valued him so much, investing so much in him before he had even advanced to the Sun Moon tier. It should be known that there was no lack of prodigies in this world. It was very easy for prodigies to wither halfway through their cultivation. It could only be said that the Mo clan was truly wealthy and could afford a 1 in a million loss. Moreover, once Ling Han became a great elite of the heavenly body tier in the future, the returns that the Mo clan could obtain would also be astonishing. If Ling Han could advance another step and reach the Eternal River tier, then the Mo clan would truly soar into the sky. Many thanks. Ling Han didn't act pretentious. He was confident that he could become a heavenly body tier, an Eternal River tier, or even a Genesis tier. The investment that the Mo clan had made today would definitely reap great rewards in the future. After returning to the Majestic Heaven sect, Ling Han began to raise the quality of the Divine Demon Sword. In less than half a day, all the godly metal had turned into scrap, and the Divine Demon Sword was still a long way from level 4. The higher the level, the more godly metal would be needed to advance, and not just an ordinary amount. Ling Han could only wait. Thankfully, there were still more than 3 months before the opening of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. The Majestic Heaven sect also began to distribute the slots to enter the Mystery Realm. Aside from the disciples of the Mountain River tier that could enter, there were also a portion of slots that would be given to people outside the sect. As for what price they would have to pay to exchange for it, only the person in charge of this matter would know. Ling Han couldn't care less about these things. He just worked hard on cultivating and refining alchemical pills. The essence of a demon master had already been mostly used up. Thankfully, Ling Han himself was the Alchemy Emperor, nourishing his martial arts with alchemical pills. Though the effects weren't as astonishing as the essence of a demon master, he could refine it himself, and there was no limit to the quantity. Good news came one after another. As the Mo clan establishment endlessly sent him godly metal, the Divine Demon Sword finally advanced to level 4, and now he needed level 4 godly metal to continue increasing the quality of the Divine Demon Sword. Don't just ask for a single level increase, the price that he needed to pay would definitely soar tenfold. Thus, Ling Han couldn't let the Mo clan establishment work for free. Instead, he planned to first pay off this debt, and then consider buying large amounts of level 4 godly metal. He pinned his hopes of making a fortune on this trip to the Mystery Realm. If he could get a few secret techniques and sell them, his income would definitely be very high. Additionally, he had also reached the middle stage of the pinnacle level, and his strength had advanced to 8 stars. This was very shocking. Hu told him to have the reincarnation tree, and he had enough time to comprehend his cultivation level. The Rain Emperor Ding Ping, Shui Yanyu, Hu Feiyun, and the others also had obvious improvements. The most impressive was still the Rain Emperor, who shockingly reached the peak stage of the medium extreme. Even with the help of Ling Han's alchemical pills and the reincarnation tree to comprehend Tao, this was still very shocking. It was as if the Rain Emperor was born for cultivation, and the higher his cultivation level, the more terrifying his explosive power was. Meanwhile, Feng Peyun, Ding Ping, and the others had only just advanced into the medium extreme, and the gap between them and the Rain Emperor was growing wider and wider. Shui Yanyu had also reached the peak stage of the high extreme. As for Hu Feiyun, because she was a clone of Empress Luanxing, as long as she cultivated seriously, her speed of improvement was also astonishing. She had already advanced into the peak stage of the consummate level, and could break through to the pinnacle level. And the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm had finally opened. Chapter 1173. The Yellow Spring Mystery Realm wasn't in the Heavenly Wind Mountains, but in the Death Valley that was 100,000 miles away. This was still the territory of the Majestic Heaven sect, but it was a forbidden area tens of thousands of years ago. One could tell from the name that this was the Death Valley, and anyone who entered would die without a doubt. Only when Venerable Trinity came here and suppressed the ominous aura did the ancient ruins buried here finally reappear in the world, allowing people to enter explore, and obtain treasures. However, this ancient site wasn't some training ground. It was designed for cultivators to take risks. This should be the abode of an elite, and it was protected by a terrifying restriction. Venerable Trinity had indeed dispelled a part of the restriction, but he couldn't completely dispel it. Thus, this place could only be entered once every 100 years, because the power of the restriction would be at its lowest. Moreover, Venerable Trinity was responsible for opening the door, allowing people to enter. Even so, it could only accommodate the power of the mountain river tier. If it was too strong, it would trigger the restriction, and the result would be terrible. Even though Venerable Trinity had dispelled the ominous aura here, it was still filled with an eerie coldness. If it wasn't for the fact that the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm opened once every 100 years, no one would be willing to come here. There were no flowers, no trees, no wild beasts, and no birds. This was a barren land. The whole valley exuded a black aura, and it was unclear where it came from. It enveloped the valley, making people want to avoid it. No one wanted to come into contact with it. But now this place was overcrowded. Some people came here to try their luck, even if they didn't get a place from the majestic heaven sect. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and he saw a familiar person he hadn't seen many times. Sha Yuan. His eyes involuntarily turned cold, revealing a sliver of killing intent. This person coveted the treasures he had, and asked him for them several times. After he refused, he even sent people to kill him. Ling Han had never forgotten this grudge. Previously, Ling Han didn't have a chance to take revenge, because Sha Yuan was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and he stayed in the academy and the great General Sha's residence all day long. How could he kill him? But now? Sha Yuan's strength hadn't changed, but Ling Han had advanced into the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. And this wasn't Point Star City but a mystery realm. Sha Yuan, you should return what you owe me. He's Sha Yuan? The Rain Emperor asked. He had heard Ling Han mention the matter of him becoming enemies with Zhao Luan, Sha Yuan, and the others. Ling Han nodded and said, "Yes, he is. Let's join forces and get rid of him," said Murong Qing murderously. The strongest among the three of them had only just advanced into the high extreme, and there was still a considerable gap between them and Sha Yuan. Even if the three of them joined forces, it was still impossible for them to win. Ling Han shook his head and said, "After we enter the secret of the mystery realm, we'll Sha Yuan." Ling Han said, Of Sha. Feng Piyun also nodded. They were all heroic people, filled with confidence in themselves, and did not want to live under Ling Han's protection. Ling Han knew that he could not dissuade them, so he nodded and said, "Be careful." He had already given enough alchemical pills to his brothers, his disciple, and Helian Tianyun. Cultivation could not always be focused on cultivation, and actual combat was equally important. Han Lin, He Tao, Wuxia, and 4 other young men and women with impressive appearances walked over. The people around them moved aside to make way for them. They were the 6 king tiers of the mountain river tier of the majestic heaven sect. They were invincible in the mountain river tier, and after entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, they were truly invincible. Because Sun Moon tier cultivators couldn't enter, who could be a match for the 6 king tiers? Of course, there were 7 king tiers now. Ling Han nodded, clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, everyone." They had met once before to discuss opening the treasure trove. Because the treasure trove was in the deepest part of the mystery realm, and there were many opportunities along the way, they couldn't leave everything behind and go there directly. Thus, they agreed to act separately before reaching the treasure trove. Wuxia had already swept away the embarrassment of losing a battle and regained his confidence. He didn't avoid Ling Han's gaze even though he was facing him again. It's about time. Soon, an elite descended from the sky like a celestial emperor, leaving behind endless divine light as if the heavens were moved by him. Venerable Trinity. It's Venerable Trinity. Many people called out, their faces filled with sincerity. In this galaxy, eternal river tier elites were the most powerful beings, and they were naturally like gods in everyone's eyes. However, no one could see the true appearance of this elite. Boundless divine light wrapped around his body, and it was impossible to tell whether he was tall, short, male, or female. If they didn't know that there was only one eternal river tier elite here, They wouldn't be able to guess his identity at all. Xiao xiao xiao. Many more figures flew over and stood behind Venerable Trinity. There were a total of 24 of them. These were 24 heavenly body tier elites of the Majestic Heaven sect. The mission today was very important, and all the elites of the Majestic Heaven sect had come out in full force. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. These 24 people didn't hide their faces, so he could see them clearly. However, aside from Wei Zicheng, Ling Han didn't recognize any of them. He only remembered their appearances in his heart. Venerable Trinity didn't waste any words, and directly spread out his arms. He began to channel a powerful mystical power to sweep away the black aura. Although the mountain wind that blew out was still sinister, it was much better. This was a necessary step. Otherwise, if they directly entered, those below the heavenly body tier would all be killed. Venerable Trinity entered the valley, and the 24 heavenly body tier elites assisted him from the side, clearing away the scattered black aura. The others all followed behind him. Those who obtained a spot were all given a jade pendant. It was inconspicuous before, but now it was exuding a faint light, forming a halo that protected them. There were also some people who wanted to fish in troubled waters, so they naturally didn't have jade pendants. They were very conspicuous here. However, the strange thing was that the great elites of the Majestic Heaven sect didn't have any intention of chasing them away. Instead, they allowed them to mingle in the crowd, which was very confusing. If the Majestic Heaven sect didn't plan to control this mystery realm, then why did they need to give out spots? After opening the mystery realm, they could just directly let people in. However, those who came here for the first time soon found out why. Ah! Someone screamed in pain and collapsed to the ground. His whole body spasmed, and it was obvious that he was in great pain. After a short while, he stopped moving and his life force completely disappeared. He was actually dead. Ling Han was astonished because he hadn't discovered anything strange at all. That person had mysteriously died. He had already cultivated to the immortal level, so there definitely wasn't some strange disease that would suddenly cause him to die. If there was anything special, it would be that the person who had died was a stowaway, and there was no jade pendant flashing. Could it be because of this reason? Chapter 1174. Ah! More screams rang out as victims appeared one after another. Without exception, none of them were protected by the light of the jade pendant. No wonder the Majestic Heaven sect didn't care about stowaways at all. As it turned out, even if they had gotten rid of the ominous aura here, cultivators below the heavenly body tier still needed special protection to pass through this valley. Was the Majestic Heaven sect cruel enough to let these people die? Ling Han shook his head. This was not a question of whether the Majestic Heaven sect was cruel or not. Rather, it was a question of whether the Majestic Heaven sect cared. They were the number one force in the galaxy, so did they need to care about what others thought? What a joke, Ling Han thought as he walked. He hadn't even walked halfway when all the stowaways were dead. He was only in the mountain river tier, so how long could he last? Ling Han's sympathy was not overflowing. Entering an ancient site to explore was to be responsible for one's own life and death. Without such awareness and courage, what was one doing in an ancient site? He was curious about what had killed these people. He knew about the black gas, but what was it? He communicated with the Black Tower and asked the Notionless Saint for guidance. That eternal river tier cultivator should have cultivated some evil cultivation technique that has affected the environment here. Notionless Saint speculated. Since that third prime junior outside couldn't sweep away all ominous signs, I can conclude that his cultivation base is far inferior to the people who died here. Ling Han agreed. One was dead and the other was alive. However, the living could not completely overthrow the arrangements of the dead. There was indeed a difference in strength. It was said that there was a huge gap between immortals, and this was proof of that. They were both at the eternal river tier. Yet Venerable Trinity could only sweep away some of the inauspicious signs. Every 100 years, he would take advantage of the fact that the power of the restriction had reached its lowest point to open a gap for others to enter. Of course, Venerable Trinity couldn't be underestimated because of this. No matter what, He was the strongest expert in the entire galaxy. No matter what, the strong should be respected. Everyone walked very slowly because the progress of clearing away the ominous black chi was very slow. Even if Venerable Trinity personally took action, he would not be able to do so easily. After half a day, they finally arrived at the bottom of the valley. Venerable Trinity unleashed his great divine ability and tore space apart. Instantly, a pitch-black entrance appeared. Through this entrance, one could see a completely different world with verdant mountains and clear waters. What was even more shocking was that a river descended from the heavens, its end nowhere to be seen, just like the Milky Way. The river was dark and gloomy, exuding an endless aura of death. One could vaguely sense countless souls churning in it. Even separated by such an entrance, Ling Han could still feel the eeriness and horror of the Milky Way. Was this the Yellow Springs? "We can go in now," Venerable Trinity said. There was a hint of exhaustion in his voice. He was a mighty eternal river tier elite, yet he was actually wearing an expression of exhaustion. It could be seen just how much of a burden it was for Venerable Trinity to clear out the ominous aura here and create a gap in the restrictions. Everyone hurriedly entered one after another. Shwa shwa shwa, their figures flashed, their speed extremely fast. Bam, one person followed, but was suddenly blown to pieces. This person was at the Sun-Moon tier, and he had deliberately suppressed his cultivation level in an attempt to sneak in. He had already reached the final step, yet no one had managed to blast him out. Instead, he had been killed by the restrictions here. Those above the mountain river tier couldn't enter. This wasn't just nonsense. Ling Han also entered with Shui Yinyu and the others. When they passed through this entrance, they all felt an obvious chill. It was as if the dead were whispering in their ears, and the surging waves of the Yellow Springs surged into the sky, releasing a deafening roar. Everyone stepped onto their own paths, and they followed the Yellow Springs. This was something that everyone knew. If one walked along the Yellow Springs, they would never lose their way. "Fourth brother, let's part ways here." The Rain Emperor and the others parted ways with Ling Han, and they all set off on their own. In the end, only Ling Han, Shui Yinyu, and Hu Feiyun remained. "Let's go." Ling Han pulled Shui Yinyu along and strode away. "Wait for me." Hu Feiyun hurriedly followed after them, as if she were afraid that Ling Han and Shui Yinyu would leave her behind. The three of them walked side by side, and after walking for a while, Ling Han sniffed and said, "Smells so good." "You..." Shui Yinyu hit him, thinking that he was flirting with her again. Really, there was still the ninth king present, and that was the Empress's clone. Ling Han laughed and said, "You've been wronged. I didn't say that your body smells good, but there's a flowery fragrance." "Really?" Shui Yinyu's eyes widened. She didn't really believe Ling Han. This guy always found ways to flirt with her. "I also smelled it." Hu Feiyun hurriedly nodded. "Let's go." Ling Han turned around. In any case, the Yellow Springs was too obvious a target, and they could see it anywhere, so there was no need to worry about losing their way. They followed the fragrance, and after a while, a small hill appeared in front of them, and on the top of the hill, there was an incredibly bright flower blooming. It was this flower that was exuding a faint fragrance. It wasn't very strong, but it could travel extremely far. The three of them weren't the first to smell the fragrance. There were two others who had arrived before them, but they clearly weren't together, and were separated on two sides. Was this a godly medicine? Ling Han didn't recognize this flower, and Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun also wore blank expressions. They were probably the same, and what stopped them was that the surroundings of the small hill were filled with white bones, some humanoid and some beast-shaped. Obviously, they weren't the only ones who had designs on this flower, but those who went to pluck it had all died. Ling Han didn't know the value of this flower, but with so many humans and beasts pouncing on it, he had reason to believe that this flower should be extremely valuable. Otherwise, why would everyone want to pluck it? Wait, wasn't this using a fixed pattern of thought? When the people who came later pounced on it, they naturally thought that the flower was a treasure, and went up in a rush. What a beautiful flower! Shui Yinyu's eyes were misty, and she revealed a dazed expression. She was about to stretch out her legs and walk towards the small hill. Ling Han hurriedly pulled her back, a shocked expression on his face. This flower's fragrance actually had the effect of confusing one's mind. However, this evidently varied from person to person. Neither he nor Hu Feiyun were affected, or rather, they hadn't been affected yet. Meanwhile, the other two had already walked forward. Their eyes were blank, but there was a fanatical expression on their faces. It was as if what they had arrived at was not a flower, but a supreme throne, and they could rule over the world and command all saints by sitting on it. Whoosh! When the two of them neared the small hill, a black cloud suddenly flew out from the small hill and swept towards the two of them. It merely scraped against them for a moment, and the black cloud was blown away, shrinking back into the small hill. And these two people had actually turned into two skeletons. The skeletons fell to the ground and became one of the many sacrifices around the small hill. So this was how people died. Chapter 1176. These insects not only had sharp teeth, but their saliva could also secrete a strange substance that caused intense pain to their prey, and even had a numbing effect. Ling Han discovered that his body had become somewhat stiff. Furthermore, this substance was spreading through his entire body along with his blood, and even his nerves were about to become numb. In this way, the power of his flames instantly weakened, and the dizzy black snakes regained their momentum, pouncing toward Ling Han again. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and the supreme mysteries of heaven and earth circulated in his body. Instantly, the numbness disappeared, and he laughed, the power of his flames rising again. Who's stronger? Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword. Hong, the divine demon sword also released endless flames, which was an excellent method to deal with insects. Wang. He was still channeling the 7-kill subduing soul technique, and a mental attack swept over. A large number of insects fell to the ground, and Ling Han stored them into the Black Tower. Perhaps they could become his secret weapon. With the circulation of the indestructible heavens scroll, Ling Han's wounds were also rapidly recovering. Although there were the occasional bugs that could break through his defenses and bite him, a mere few bugs were not enough to pose a threat at all. After all, they were really too small, and if tens of thousands or hundreds of millions of them attacked together, their power would be terrifying, and they could instantly eat up a person's flesh. Master, I admire you so much. The Azura Demon Emperor flattered from the side. Indeed, he had taken control of a Sun Moon tier puppet, but faced with these insects he suffered a crushing defeat, and one of his arms was almost bitten off. However, Ling Han had the upper hand. In comparison, the gap between them was obvious. This didn't mean that Ling Han was stronger than Sun Moon tier elites. Rather, it was because his current techniques were more targeted. His physique was powerful, and added with the recovery ability of the indestructible heaven scroll, he was the best candidate to deal with these insects. The sky was full of black clouds, but they had a clear area of activity, and definitely would not fly out. Even Ling Han's figure could not be seen, and only the flickering of flames could be vaguely seen, indicating that he was still fighting. However, as they fought, the black clouds began to grow fainter and fainter, because large amounts of bugs were killed and collected by Ling Han. One could see that a thick layer of bug corpses had formed under his feet. Finally, no more insects dared to attack Ling Han. The remaining insects flew back to the hill. Suddenly, the surroundings became quiet. Ling Han looked at the strange flower, and held his breath and all the pores on his body. Then he used the indestructible heaven scroll to guard his divine sense. In his mind, his true self sat on guard, emitting a golden light. Only then did he walk towards the strange flower. When he got closer, he began to dig the soil instead of plucking the flower. He dug out the strange flower along with its roots, and then stored it into the Black Tower. He planted this flower first, and then left the Black Tower. Let's go. He did not shovel the small mound away, leaving the black insects a chance to live. The three of them and the puppet continued to move forward. They did not return to the Yellow Springs. In any case, they just needed to follow the direction. There was no need to follow the river. After tens of thousands of years, there was at least one thing that was certain, and that was that they absolutely could not go into the river, not even touching the river water. Why was it called the Yellow Springs? It was not as simple as just going up and being sinister. It was basically a river of death that could take away one's life. If one came into contact with the river water, they would die, and their soul would be swallowed by the river water. There had once been people who wanted to collect the water of the yellow springs. Unfortunately, they had just gotten close, and before they could collect it, only an empty shell remained of their body. This was a forbidden area, and could only be used as a signpost. As Ling Han walked, he communicated with the Black Tower, and asked Notionless Saint about the strange flower and the black insects. Could this be the misty soul-capturing flower? Notionless Saint thought for a moment, and then said, although it is completely useless to humans, its effects are extremely terrifying. In fact, it can even confuse the mind of Eternal River Tier elites. Ling Han nodded and said, right now this misty soul-capturing flower can't even affect me, which means that it is far from mature? That should be the case, Notionless Saint said. If this misty soul-capturing flower was used well, it would be extremely effective. Because Ling Han had the Black Tower, he could summon the misty soul-capturing flower, and then hide in the Black Tower. However, this misty soul-capturing flower was far from mature. Even he could not affect it, so it would definitely be ineffective against Sun Moon Tier elites. At the very least, it would take a long time to see its effects. Then what about this insect? He asked. The Saint Beetle Notionless Saint was slightly astonished. Ling Han was puzzled and he asked, this kind of thing that eats human flesh can actually be called a saint? The orb of light that Notionless Saint had transformed into flickered, and it seemed like he was slightly moved. After a while he said, that's because this insect was born from the corpse of a saint after his death. Huh. Ling Han was astonished. A saint could actually create such a strange insect after his death? Not every saint will be like this after their death. Depending on the great Tao they cultivate, some will turn into Saint Fire insects, while others will turn into Saint Ice insects. Moreover, not all insects are so small. I've seen a saint insect before, and it was tens of thousands of meters long. Its strength was also unfathomable, and even I didn't dare to oppose it, Notionless Saint said. Tens of thousands of meters long. Could it still be called an insect? Ling Han said, in that case, it's possible that this is the abode of a saint. Impossible. Notionless Saint immediately denied this and said, if this was a trap set up by a saint, then how could a mere Eternal River Tier cultivator break through the restrictions? Unless they purposely let you in. It's probably a brat here who obtained some saint beetles from somewhere and slowly nurtured so many. Moreover, if it was the first batch of saint beetles that were born, they could easily bite even Eternal River Tier elites to death. How could they have been collected by you? Ling Han nodded. He had also obtained some saint beetles, so he could also slowly increase their numbers. However, these things really had to be treated with caution. If they were allowed to go out of control, the damage they could cause would be devastating. Saints were invincible when they were alive, and they could also cause chaos and death. However, everything had two sides. As long as they were used well, saint beetles could also play a positive role. After traveling for a day, they stopped and set up camp, preparing to rest. There was a change of day and night in this mystery realm, but it was only a change of light and darkness. It couldn't affect the sun, moon, or stars. It was clear that Eternal River Tier elites didn't have the ability to capture a sun and place it in the mystery realm. They had a total of half a year. After half a year, the restrictions would gradually become stronger, and even Venerable Trinity wouldn't be able to break through them. Thus, they had to return to the place where they had entered after half a year. At that time, Venerable Trinity would tear open the mystery realm again and take them away. They had to make sure of this timing. Otherwise, if they missed it, the restrictions would slowly become stronger and kill the outsiders. They had never heard of anyone surviving to the next 100 years. Oh, you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.